lunch hour. And I'm really thankful and grateful that your participation was making that possible. So as we go forward, ladies and gentlemen, we are now getting into the session that my co-facilitator, Andy, will now speak to, together with introducing the host. Please can I ask you to put your hands together for Andy as he comes through. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back from lunch. Now, before we get into our next speaker, I just wanted to give you a quick recap of what we have done very quickly this morning. Of course, Fayaz King started off with an incredible presentation, and just looking at some of his agenda items, remember we talked about the issues for policymakers, for the markets, and for banks, insurers, and fintech, some of the issues they could do. Policymakers, issue of AI and finance supervisory notes, strengthen the sandbox, create a financial data council, pilot subtech tools. For markets, infrastructures, adopt FAIR, fair data standards, use AI and market surveillance, align with ISSB sustainability disclosures. For banks, insurers, and fintechs, establish model risk management charters, build products for first-time users, track data lineage, share fraud intelligence, invest in cross-functional talent. And of course, the outcomes, we must achieve inclusion, so women, youth, rural communities, and first-time users are not left behind. We need to create resilience, so systems withstand shocks, fraud, and cyber attacks. Integrity, so our markets run on fairness and transparency. And the enablers to get there, principle-based policy, proportionate oversight, data, and model governance. Those are some of the recommendations made by Fayaz King. Thank you for those. Colin? Of course, Colin spoke about, his question was simple, how to form capital, how to have long-term growth in Zimbabwe based on longer-term finance rather than short-term finance. Colin's suggestions is securitization and tokenization. Of course, he talked at tokenization, he talked about the biological assets, for example, within farmers, and how we can unlock the hidden value in those assets and be able to trade them on capital markets. Of course, Colin didn't go into some of his issues at ZMX and how that is also bringing in inclusion in the rural areas, in particular through agricultural marketing and trade, which also builds up confidence as well. Wanda Mafunda, of course, he spoke to issues such as what can government do? Well, he said that government should create enabling frameworks for inclusive data governance and recourse. Industry publish clear engagement standards. Partners, we need to make sure marginalized districts, marginalized communities are involved in that. Inclusiveness. And of course, how do we track that? How many first-time users are retained, resolution and response times, and low connectivity context. So all our speakers this morning did give us some really actionable issues to deal with. And just to finalize on Ambassador Callon, which brings us, I think, very nicely to our next speaker, Ambassador Callon talked about practical experiences he had. It needs, confidence needs national ownership. You earn trust is not transactional. It's engagement, empathy, credibility, and securing buy-in. You must be convincing, you must have integrity, you must offer value, and you must become a true partner. So that just gives us a quick 5-minute update on the morning discussions. But also it then takes us into our next topic. We have changed the schedule of the program a little bit, but we'll be back on track. But to talk on the case for confidence, relevance of insurance and long-term savings, which is critical, of course, to Zimbabwe, I'd like you to please help me and join me in welcoming Tafazwa Muguti. He's Permanent Secretary for Presidential Affairs and Devolution in the Office of the President and Cabinet. Please, a big round of applause for Permanent Secretary Muguti.
A very good afternoon to you all. I know it's very difficult for you to pay attention after lunch, but let me recognize the country director for United Nations in Zimbabwe, Dr. Ed Cullen, my big brother. Let me also recognize the CEO, the group CEO, Sam, my big brother again, Faisal, one of the most brilliant minds we have on IT in this country, and all the speakers who have spoken before, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. So one of the things that I agreed to was that I would come and speak to you as the permanent secretary in the presidency, but not read a speech, and be able to speak just like any other Zimbabwean, so that we can address the issue of confidence. And I believe that by the end of my speech, we should be able to agree if I've won you over with confidence or not. And I think that's the primary target of today. But at the same time, history tells us that it's once upon a time the Americans had a currency for every state. So imagine in Zimbabwe having a currency for Harare Metropolitan Province, having a currency for Matabeleland South. And they say that each time the Americans traveled, they had to change their currency within the same country. There were different currencies. And one day, three bankers got together and said, this is nonsense. Surely we can think better than this. And we're told of a story that hours and hours of deliberations gave us one of the world's first central banks. And out of that, the US dollar was created as the single most currency. But their vision was so intense, they had nothing to back that currency with, but just confidence. And hundreds of years later, the American dollar becomes the only fiat in the world which is not backed by anything but confidence. And then we see fellow Africans who are wealthy in gold, platinum, chrome, you name it. Zimbabwe has over 80 extractable minerals. And for some reason, we still need something tangible to back our own currency, which is a sign of lack of confidence. So how do the Americans do it? How does a country which is the most indebted country in the world continue to create a facade that they're most economical country and richest country in the world? Confidence. So we will talk about confidence today, and I will welcome any question. I normally get into trouble for speaking my mind. Recently was in trouble. But I never regret what I say. Because in this country, we need to mature to a level where uncomfortable conversations create a comfortable environment for us to thrive. And that's what we're failing to do in government. We're failing to do it in private sector. We're failing to do it in churches. And it almost takes me back to the days when we used to watch Santa Barbara with our parents. And when people were kissing, we'd all go like this, as if we didn't know what was kissing. And nowadays, our children don't go like this. You all look. So there has to be a point where we bring this elephant in the room called confidence, and we talk about it. So there cannot be any confidence without trust. Let me take you back to 2008. And I'll tell you about a young man who had started his company in 2002 in the bedroom of his parents. And great mind. And within 5 years, was controlling about 80% of the financial services sector as one of the leading IT security companies, getting international awards, recognition. And at some point, he went and bought over one of the oldest security guard company services, and from 50 employees, he now had over 700 employees. And come 2008, one day he's looking outside the window of his office in the former UDC building, to those of you with gray hair, now ZB Center, and across at NMB, people are queuing. At CBZ, people are queuing. And he's asking himself what is going on. And he'd learn years later in college, studying his banking qualification, that was called a bank on the run. And so we woke up one morning to many banks on the run. And that young man was me. Started my first business at 22, got our first investors at 24, and by the time I was 29, I had 700 employees. In 2008, I woke up and I was told to start paying people in US dollars, which I did not have. I'd created a global wealth fund with then Trust Bank, and at that time it was equivalent to almost 300,000 US dollars. I'd contribute 80%, my staff would contribute 20%, and we would give it to their asset management firm. And every month, each employee got a statement of what that Global Wealth Fund meant. And I call that era the Great Betrayal. Because all of a sudden, no one in this country answered anyone's phones. Not your banker, not your insurance clients, not your insurance company. Everyone was now fending for themselves. And I think history should never repeat itself. Because history repeating itself is an abject sign of failure in leadership. And what happened in 2008 gave birth to the reality of the future which we are standing in today. And how we address life after 2008 has created the confidence barometer of how we react to everyday decisions in this country today. 2008, some of us were so burnt that we packed our bags and relocated our companies outside the country. But it didn't help because that confidence had already been taken away. And years would then tell of how many Zimbabweans also went into the diaspora but came back with nothing because they carried that mistrust and lack of confidence in anything else. During lunchtime, I was saying to Dr. Carlon and my brother Sam that it is difficult for a man to have a baby with a woman he doesn't trust. And I was then corrected by Dr. Carlon that maybe by mistake it's possible. But what I was trying to say is that you can never enter into a relationship which is long-term if there's no trust. And so going on to those days, you then find that we became a broke nation, spiritually and financially. And I remember even the pastors were panicking. And it was a situation where no one knew, how are we going to get out of this? And where there was needed a voice of reason, that voice did not come. In fact, it became each man for himself, each woman for himself, and God for us all. For the first time, Zimbabweans saw empty shelves with no food. For the first time, we couldn't pay employees. For the first time, reality really hit us. 8 years after sanctions, that we were the black sheep of this continent. But how did we get there, is the question. It comes back again to our decisions that we've made in the past and decisions that we continue to make today. So I was enjoying myself listening to people, watching the face of my elder brother, Dr. Gavin Amashi, as people were really having a dig, and I could hear little whispers about the ZIG and how the ZIG is going to, be there and etc. And I meant what I said. We are all traveling around in a borrowed vehicle. And at some point, the lease is going to run out, and the vehicle has to go back. So the question is to Zimbabwe is, do we start wallowing now about 2030, or we start preparing? And I was saying that if I were Old Mutual, and I'm sitting on 450,000 plus civil servants, and I knew that the pension environment in this country has not been so innovative, I would like to de-risk myself by offering ZIG products now than later. And when we do the crossover, it makes it easier for sustainability. But you see, something is missing in Zimbabwe, and that thing which is missing is reality. You see, Zimbabweans, fellow Zimbabweans, your opinions are not facts. I see someone saying, ouch, that's the truth. The fact that you believe the moon is blue doesn't make it blue. And in our culture, we have this saying, says, that's why you are all here, because otherwise, if you did not understand what I'm articulating, you're in the wrong room. And history will remember this day when we are telling each other the truth. That whether you like it or not, whether your opinion is yes or no, the ZIG is going to be your sole currency. And we cannot be a country without their sole currency. And what I applaud the president to have done is the confidence to make that bold decision outside the safety zone. And what is the safety zone? The safety zone is when we all came into what we call the safe mode. And Faisal will tell you that in 1997, 1998, when I was a young technician, when you were fixing computers, you had to press F2, 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 F2 when you restart. And Windows 3.1, later 95, 98, would go into this mode where it was called safe mode. Normally we did it when a computer crashed. And we just used to do it so that you could put quickly the floppy drive, back up the data, and then format the drive. In the safe mode, you could still do certain things, let's say about 30% of the normal functions. And this economy went into a safe mode post-2008, where we became so critical of decisions which even do not need criticality. We became so critical about the decisions that are made for us, on behalf of us, and on behalf of those that are not even with us. And that has led us to continue operating in this sphere, which is called the safe mode, where you know your full potential, but we have created an artificial ceiling over our heads. Were we the only ones to have done that? No. South Africa went through it, Zambia went through it, Nigeria went through it, even America went through it. And I was asking Sam yesterday, and I said, it was puzzling that whilst we watched our inheritance eroded, Americans through AON had done one of the best reinsurance structures the world has ever seen. And no one lost their money. No one lost their insurance. No one lost their savings because the reinsurance gear kicked in. And if I was going to ask in this room today, raise your hands and name 5 reinsurance companies in this country, most of us can't. And yet, these are some of the fundamental issues that we have to then look at. So South Africa went into the safe mode. But whenever you're in the safe mode, people forget that there's an opportunity for innovation. Post-2008, when everyone was playing it safe, up comes OUTsurance, and out of nowhere, they blow everyone's mind up. And before you know it, OUTsurance became the go-to for medium income earners and low income earners. Because they knew that if they went to the big guys, the corporates, the businessmen, they thought too much. They processed things too much, literally. But they knew that they could help the smaller guy understand the importance of insurance. And the first thing that they did, they used actuarial science to approach it. And so they decided to say, let's look at the risk factors of insurance. The darker the car, the bigger the risk. The lighter the car, the less the risk. So in South Africa today, if you want to insure your car and your car is black, please note that that's a risk factor and they would charge you more. But if you want to buy a white car, their argument is that at night you're more visible, in daytime you're not visible. And they call it a stigmata, where basically sometimes a car can come, especially the silver ones, and you only see it when it's here. I know most of you know what I'm talking about. So they looked at all these risk factors, and all of a sudden, they also looked at habits. If we're going to insure Sam goes skydiving, and you got some crazy Afrikaners in South Africa, who do crazy things. Jump out of planes, they're smoking, they're partying, they're doing all these excessive lifestyles. And then you got Temba, the guy who just goes to work, goes back home, goes to church, goes to work, goes to church. Why should Temba and Van Rensburg pay the same insurance claim? Temba doesn't jump out of planes. Temba doesn't do suicidal habits. And so the ordinary man began to be seen in the midst of calamity. So the question back to you insurance players, why does my Mercedes-Benz pay the same insurance with the Honda Fit? Because we have created this thing called third-party IPEC, where it's a safe zone. It's like all kids running in a race and we all came out number 1. Have you gone to schools like that, that every child gets a medal? They say, every child is a winner. You've gone to schools like that. Please don't take your kids to such schools. What I'm trying to say is that if we're going to make insurance work, if we're going to make the financial services work, let's stop sugarcoating issues. Let's be real. In which world does $1 of airtime give you cover for $2,000 US? on your funeral cover? Which world? I've tried to put my mind to it. There's no actuarial formula which can give us $1 a cover for airtime for $2,000 of funeral cover. That's why we're told that MNOs, mobile network operators, if you're here, I don't apologize. You are not financial intermediaries. Simple. Because as long as we play with money, we're playing with people's lives. And we all saw it, that one morning we all woke up to the word called demutualization. And I remember my father calling me saying, we are going to, and he had a letter from First Mutual, and he's asking, what does this mean? And it's become the habit that Zimbabweans, we throw mafoko to the public and expect them to understand what we're saying. How do we then digest the conversations we're having here and take them to Dotito, Sam? How do we identify the clientele that we have? How are we going to achieve financial inclusivity if we cannot translate the basic corporate lingo into layman poverty talk? And that's where the balance is. But the safe mode remains the biggest predicament to this country because everyone is playing it safe. The banks do not want to give loans. They don't want any risk of non-performing loans. So guess what? They up the bank charges. Zimbabwean banks are the most profitable right now in the sub-Saharan region without trading. Zimbabwean banks declare profits, and yet the percentage of their revenue is bank charges. And what worries me is the base of accounts which are sitting in this country is not growing. That means that we are not increasing our account holders. We're just sweating the little that we have. And that becomes a problem because it is a false narrative that there's growth. There's a false narrative. How are we sitting in a safe mode where we've got 25% of the economy as formal and we have 75% informal, and then we sugarcoat it under the term SMEs? They don't pay tax. They don't answer to anyone. But that 75% is the same percentage which wants to go to Parrenyatwa and expect Parrenyatwa to have medicines. It's the same percentage which goes back home on a bus and then complains that our road government there gadzira roads. But they don't pay a cent to this. And this 25% of us, we've normalized it in the safe zone, where we don't talk about it, we don't ask about it, and we end up also then doing our own things to survive. And most of it is overcharging, and most of it is getting into a comfortable zone. 30% of this country has got medical aid. 70% of this country has got funeral cover. What does that tell you? We're looking forward to dying, eh? Do you know why? Because when you're dead, you will still get buried by those who are there, whether they're the policy or not. We'll make a plan. So the person doesn't even care if it lapses when I'm dead, I'm dead. But the bottom line which is there is that the numbers don't lie. Something is wrong. How do you have a country not worried about the health of themselves today? But if we had done our maths right, like what South Africa did post-2008, would have more solid, more affordable healthcare cover, which meant would not have greedy doctors. Yes, I said it, would not have greedy doctors. Charging you $80 for consultation. If you convert $80, how many thousand rands is that? 1,200 rands. Can you imagine just to see someone, hello, how are you? What are you feeling? Go for a test. 1,200 rands. No pill, nothing. It means that we would have created an ecosystem where our people can have affordability. But you see, in the safe zone, this safe mode, will then create a problem also of people being comfortable with mediocrity. And when people become comfortable with mediocrity, it means one day, one of my MDs for another company I invested in goes to the bank and he gets a bank card linked to the company account. And then I called the FD. I said, listen, this is not corporate governance. Can you create a sub-account so that it's not directly linked for risk purposes? And he says, but Chef, and I said, but that's not how it's supposed to be. So when you look at where we are as Zimbabwe, our financial services sector, we are living and surviving in this space called the safe zone, safe mode, where we are actually restricting ourselves from going beyond this artificial ceiling that we have created. And the question still begs to differ that, do we have more potential than what we have currently? So, this issue of resilience is personified by profit of effort. But the issue of survival is personified by you avoiding risks. So when you run a business in a tough economy, they'll say you are resilient. But when you cut corners just to survive, we'll say you survived. And that's where we need to start asking ourselves, corporate CEOs who are in here, are we resilient people in business, or we are people who have mastered the art of survival? Because that becomes the greatest question. Because resilience, then we see products, Linda, that we are holding. We see products, the outsurances, all the big companies. To those of you who don't know King's Insurance in South Africa, when they came in, it was for the colored and Indian community. Even all the adverts, they were very blunt about it. They wanted to insure those rims. They wanted to insure those speeding cars. They wanted to insure, but they also went for the diasporans. They were very clear, and they took their market share. First for women, they came up with crazy ideas. Women will go overseas and buy a $2,000 handbag. And then when that $2,000 handbag is moving around, that's $2,000 US. And they created insurance packages for handbags. Talk about innovation. And they even went further, and all the guys in South Africa right now have got the basics of basics, which is insurance for your cell phone. There's no insurance for cell phones in this country. Yabiwa yabaya. That's it. Are we saying we are so much beleaguered by this ceiling of safe mode that we cannot even offer a product for insuring people's cell phones? Simple thing, $1 a month or whatever it is. That shows you that something is wrong because we have blocked out the innovation gap. And we keep identifying the client in a market with 25% only formalized. We are still going to sell insurance to the guy in the tie. When you know 75% is the guy in jeans, who now has more disposable income than the guy in the tie. Go to the outskirts. Look at the houses they're building in Kadoma, in Kwekwe, in Chipinge, in Chiredzi. They're building houses there that if you lift them, they can fit right in Borodale. You've all seen it. That means those people have a disposable income. But you see, in Zimbabwe, we have this habit of sometimes titles get to us. It's not just us. Because I don't understand why we do not have the Nigerian aggressiveness of bank managers knocking on our doors and simply saying, I'm here to serve you. If I say raise your hands, those of you in 10 years who have had a banker come to your company or to your house to offer you a product, none of you will raise your hands. But go to Nigeria, where the bank manager moves around with faucet, going tax shop by tax shop banking, tax shop by tax shop SME banking, informal companies banking them and making sure that the risk is on them. I was telling Sam that in my 14 years outside the country, in different countries, I've never had to walk into a bank branch. There was always Standard Bank or someone would come to me and simply say, Mr. Mguti, we are offering you a credit card. We are offering you this. We are offering you that. And of course, some would say yes, some would say no. But it was that relationship which I began to see that it's no longer transactional, but I can actually talk to this person and get myself to go somewhere. And once upon a time, I had a guy who used to sell me insurance in this country, and this guy would make me believe that, you know what, I am covered. Covered is safer than heaven. Right now, I don't think it's any of you, if Sam came and said, let me sell you this life policy, right now in this room, many of us will not sign that paper. That is the reality. That's why many of us don't have any pension, but we've got funeral policy. Meaning that we're not even seeing beyond our death. We're not even planning for beyond our death. I would like to talk to you about the two principles, the two disciplines rather, that foster development. And now I'm getting into the solutions. And I'm writing a book about this. Please don't steal my idea. There are two disciplines that I've learned in my young life. And me transitioning from business to politics to government has taught me two fundamental issues. And having consulted for other governments, it just taught me even more lessons. And having moved around with people like Edgar Callon and Dr. Ayo Desile and many of my other friends in the diplomatic community, it has made me understand it even deeper. The two disciplines that create economic balance, and some of you I had dinner with on Tuesday, had an opportunity to hear me speak a bit about this, and I'll speak about it now. The first one is called sovereign discipline. And the second one is called fiscal discipline. You see, what starts first is fiscal discipline across the entire nation. A government comes up with policies, thou shalt pay 15% tax, thou shalt do A, B, C, D. And all organizations have the fiscal discipline to implement the policies which they have agreed. Because the fiscal policy for this country is not for the president, it's for the country. The monetary policies for this country are not for the president, it's for the country. So with that in mind, fiscal discipline then allows us, all of us, to go right when we're supposed to go right. That's why you find in South Africa, whenever it's tax season, no matter how cold it is, everyone wakes up, puts on their jackets, and goes to queue at SARS to pay their tax. That's fiscal discipline. It's you knowing that where I am as a legal persona, I've got a responsibility, a fiscal responsibility to this country. And that then entitles you for your opinion to be translated into a fact or a suggestion, which then gets incorporated into policy. So Zimbabwe is missing the discipline called fiscal discipline. We have companies still externalizing money. We have people who are making money and we don't know where they're making it from. We have people who have become so rich, and yet the basic fiscal fundamentals of this country cannot equate or translate their wealth into the policies that we have made. That becomes a challenge. Then we have sovereign discipline. Sovereign discipline is that if we agree that in this country we do not smoke in public, it simply means we do not smoke in public. There's no exception. Sovereign discipline means that there's something in us, some element of pride that says as Zimbabweans, this we do not do. That's why you find when we grew up, a gun was a taboo. We only saw it with police officers, sometimes on TV. Killing someone was taboo in Zimbabwe. Wakaponda munhu. Oh. Because that was the sovereign discipline we had. A good indication that we've lost our barrels is when you find some idiot driving along oncoming traffic in the morning with tinted windows. No number plate, tinted windows, and is driving straight at you. That person has got no sovereign discipline. That person is not behaving as a Zimbabwean should. Because all Zimbabweans go through the highway code. All Zimbabweans respect one another. All Zimbabweans respect life. All Zimbabweans fear. They respect that gap. They respect the law. So when you find that idiot on the highway driving towards you, when you also then say Nandin Zguaro and you're all facing one another, and you're not just letting the idiot go, it means also you do not have sovereign discipline anymore. Let me just get the elephant out of the room. So, let me talk about this teens issue. Because I know you're all dying to ask me. So first and foremost, you have to understand what I do. As Permanent Secretary for Presidential Affairs, I do everything. That's why you find if there are land barons, I talk about it. If there are health issues in the country, I talk about it. But I'm not a person who talks without consulting. I'm not a person who talks without a directive. And I'll not say who directed me. But what is very important is that in a space where every day in this country we're losing 30 to 50 kids to drugs on a daily basis, and where we are impounding at least 400 to 500 kgs of drugs a day, we are now in a state of national emergency on drug issues. And because we are now in a state of emergency on drug issues, we are taking it the same way we are taking with COVID. We want the future we are discussing here to be there tomorrow. If it means we sacrifice something today, me and you, so that these kids can be there tomorrow when we are retiring and they take over from where we are, then by God's blessing, let's take off those tins. And we show the criminals that they cannot hide behind our own insecurities. So I understand people who say that windows are being broken into, we've got all these things going on. We do not solve a crack on a bottle by putting a bandage. If the problem is that you're feeling insecure, let's improve on police efficiency. If the problem is that we have more cars, then let's make sure we bring technology, Faisal, that makes us safer on the roads. So the law is there. Take it how you want to take it. But if you have a bus, I've owned transport companies before, go to VID and tell me if you come back with your tint. The law simply says undistorted vision, because tint is a trademark. It's a brand name. The material is called a film. It's not called a tint. So when we say undistorted vision, we're talking about 360-degree vision. But then again, we're now living in a toxic social media environment where every buffoon thinks he's a professor. So the question is, do we need to answer? Or we need to be able to allow you to translate it into your own notion? Now, the tint window is out. Let's get back to the topic of today. So, for us, those two need then to be balanced. And we need to then get into a point where we call the call for disruptive thinking. Now, how do we call for disruptive thinking? Disruptive thinking says that we have 5 million registered farmers, and they are all not yet financially included. And disruptive thinking says, what is it that they want? Not what do I want to give them. This is the problem with Zimbabwe. Everyone is thinking about what we want. No one is asking me what I want. Ask the farmer. I invested in a company which is doing quite well, which is doing agricultural products, and they are doing outgrower. And they went some part southern of Zimbabwe, I'll not mention where, and they rolled out red sorghum to farmers. And as they were growing these red sorghums, their numbers began to increase because they had asked the farmers, what do you want? And the farmers had told them that where we are right now, there are no shops. So even if you give me a bank card, I have nowhere to go. The farmers had told them where we are. Can you see my phone? There's no network. So even if you give me a mobile wallet, I cannot transact. But if you give me a cash, I can get on Umshika and go buy groceries in the next city and come back. So they devised different solutions with the financial services company and reached the consensus that a certain percentage is cash, certain percentage is banked, and they're doing quite well. That engagement was important. But I always see people going there, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. That's why, for me, the third-party thing, IPEC, needs to be looked into. That's why a healthcare cover should be based on our tendencies and risk profiling. So we're looking forward to disruptive thinking. Disruptive thinking means that we need to relook at our actuarial approach and say, what is the definite risk that the average Zimbabwean client has? And how do we remove that risk factor? Zimbabweans are very loyal people. Try providing risk insurance in West Africa, where people fake their deaths. You'll pay out every day. But Zimbabweans are so disciplined to the effect that if you really, really put your mind to it, anything can work in this country. So we're now looking forward, Sam, to you and your team, embracing a new way of thinking. But then we also face the challenge that sometimes we really don't like to give young minds an opportunity. We talk about inclusivity, right? And someone spoke about the youth. And the best technologies run in the world right now, Faisal will tell you, were not designed by professors. It was these young guys. You see, the human mind is just like AI. is based on exposure. The fact that all of you grew up seeing a calculator, it makes you very knowledgeable in numbers. But these youngsters are growing up in the age of programming. It makes them logically competent. That's why your kids can do things with your TV you can't do, because they're really exposed to that. But I'm shocked that the biggest companies in this country do not have young people as think tanks. It is us, the 60 and 70-year-olds, sorry to say, who want to make decisions for 19-year-olds. Why don't you call a 19-year-old, put them in a think tank with their qualification, and see the magic of what they think of? Why should we put a lead on innovation? Google, if you go today, the reason why they've got all those couches which look funny and etc. is because their best thinkers are the young guys. They're coming straight from college. They have no mortgage. They have no 2 wives. It's just him. So he can begin to think and make his mind up about the future. What is the future he wants to see? Yeah? So the next step of how we beat this is, let's take those kids from university, use what they've been exposed to with the latest technologies, and we go far. This hype about AI is just a computerized encyclopedia. Because AI is what we feed it. It's not coming from heaven. It's data. Faisal will tell you, back in the day we had something called knowledge base. And when we used to fix problems as IT experts, you would then create the steps on how you fixed the problem. And then the next time someone went and typed the question, how do you fix this problem? The answer that you put in is what would come out for that person. And you'd hear people say, hey, the computer is very clever. No, it is someone who entered that information. That's why today, if you say Zimbabwe, the bulk of the news you get is negative. Because you journalists write negative things, and you misquote P.S. Mguti every time he talks. So what you will see there is what these journalists have written. But if I also, with my publicity team, start also putting good content, tomorrow when you look after for me, you will see the good things which are there. So the data that AI is going to dish out is the wisdom that we are going to input today. Not what they are going to input. And that's where the catch is. So we need innovation minds, and we need disruptive minds to start now taking us beyond. So growth is stimulated by your attitude. Someone called me today and just said, oh, PS, I just want to check on you. And said, can I tell you a story? And for some reason, they thought I'm having a mental breakdown and they just need to give me a word of encouragement. And they said, PS, when I left New Zealand and I came to Zimbabwe, I made my mind up that the moment I set foot in Zimbabwe, I'll not complain about this, about this, about this, about this, because that's the reality that I've entered into. And from where I am sitting, we've got our attitude skewed. And we need to fix that. Zimbabweans' negativity is not going to get us out of this conundrum. We're not going to get out of this space. We need to change the attitude. And the attitude starts with affirmation. It starts with you having confidence in yourself and those who make decisions for you. We are so lack of confidence. And in social matters, you see it by the rise of churches which are being created. You don't even trust your pastor to hold your head. And you go and start your own church now. We need to be in a space where confidence is restored, but the attitude is right. I've given myself an opportunity that I will do the best thing I can. Because a couple of years back, 5 years back, I'm driving my kid from school in South Africa. And my second born, my 3 kids, and my second born says to me, Daddy, is Zimbabwe that bad? Because these little white kids at school had been mocking her about the country she comes from. First I said, why are you sad, Marty? He says, these kids were making fun of me. I said, why? He said, they're saying Zimbabwe is one of those words and it's a country where you can't go. I said, no, it's not like that, baby. We have a very beautiful country. Then he said, why don't we live there? This is a child who's 7 years old, eh? So the div is so nice. Why are we not living there? They said, well, there are some problems. And the currency issues. And I tried to lower it to that level. And then I explained to the baby, but in time it will work. But you see, we just have to fix one or two things as a country, and you know, we'll be going on. Then he says, so Daddy, what are you going to do about it? And I've never been dumbfounded before. I'd never been numb. I couldn't answer. He says, Daddy, what are you going to do about it? And so I made a decision back then that I would take any opportunity to say good about my country. And some of you remember, I started going on SABC and talking about Zimbabwe. I started going on CNBC and talking about Zimbabwe. And I would defend Zimbabwe almost every 8 o'clock news. Whenever I could, I started making Zimbabwe a conversation. And before long, the government started giving me facts. The party started giving me facts. And I started to speak about Zimbabweans, even though we're in the worst crisis ever. That's attitude. So people ask, where did this Muguti come from? No, I created my own route with a positive attitude. So every day I'm driving, I'm seeing one of the best, beautiful places in the world and where my kids are going to grow up well. Because it's my duty to change that just as well as it's yours. So when you go home and you start complaining and whining, as my bank is, as my road is, what are you going to do about it? And you need to be able to answer your kids on that. So attitude is what is going to change us. And companies also need to have a positive attitude where we are and how we're going to go about it. So Zimbabwe is an opportunity to lay a solid foundation for us. We only have a few years to go, guys. 2030 is around the corner. That least car is going to go. How do we make our currency stronger? How do we make the confidence be built back? Old Mutual, everyone else, First Mutual, those are in here. Let's start creating products which give us that confidence. And I asked someone the other day, a banker, I said, do you know what? Do you know you would actually issue out Zig credit cards? Do you know that? And I've asked, why don't we? Why don't we have Zig credit cards? The bankers in this house. Do you know there's no reason? It's simply a soft loan that you're going to pay over time. And I'm sure all of us would love a Zig credit card because there are times when you need the Zig and you don't have it. But it's this stigmata, this environment where we are, where let's play it safe. Let those politicians think, let us do this, and then when it all crumbles, we still find someone to blame. And we are not making those decisions. So Zimbabwe, we have a great opportunity for us over the next few years to really build a good, conclusive culture that we want to go on. So the US dollar remains not our currency, and we still need to build our own currency. And of course, what is more important is that we remain this ocean in the midst of a desert. And for me, I am seeing how, and I don't get it, at a farm, when you pay those salaries, this guy will get $150 at most with overtime. He's got 4 kids. And I always sit there and wonder, hey, with my salary and my income, with my 3 kids and 1 wife, I'm struggling to make it balance. And this guy and his family has got so much joy, Baba Tambira, with $150. And the next month they make it count. And I wonder how. Because none of you can survive in such an environment. Your 150 is your lunch. But this guy is surviving 30 days. It's attitude. It's about us understanding that with what I have, I should be able to make the most of it. In conclusion, we need to understand that the innovativeness of our today is going to shape tomorrow. And we need to start having candid discussions, candid conversations. And I'm always saying to industrialists like Sekai and others that if you truly believe that what government is doing is wrong, and you're truly, truly sincere that you want to see things work well, then we should be able to have a conversation and find each other. We've done it with sugar tax, done it with a number of bills. Even now, government is having tough conversations about lowering the taxes and fees and easing the ease of doing business. Those were tough conversations. But you CEOs came to the table and we had candid conversations, Sakai. We see ZI. Now everyone knows your totem. We had tough conversations, and you would sit in my office and say, but PS, no, this won't work, and we'd debate and debate. And when we did our recommendations, we had found each other. Let's stop talking in corridors and let's talk in the boardroom. Let's have candid discussions. And let's understand that your opinion might just be the next answer to the problem that we have. So we need to start having these candid discussions, but I always challenge those who organize such events that make sure that people from all corners of the world, just like those 3 bankers in America, can remember these days that we're sitting and meeting in Avondale and discussing these issues. So the bottom line, which is there, trust has to be earned. And it has taken me a while to trust insurance companies because I got burned. My father got burned. My mother got burnt, my brothers got burnt. And I'm looking forward to the day when all of us can trust our financial services sector. When all of us stop keeping money under our pillows and save it in the banks. And you trust that your bank is not going to charge you an arm and a leg for you giving them money. But it's actually going to be innovative and sweat your deposit. Because banking is simple. It's basically a depositor depositing money to an intermediary, meaning a middle person, and that person taking that money and lending someone for a fee and making the margin. But we're not seeing anything on the fee. We are seeing fees being done by the intermediary. And the result is that when you get your money, you gave them $20, they were supposed to lend it out, make $5 interest on top, get back the loan, give you $3, and they retain $2, their profit. You're giving them $20, they're giving you back $5. That's what's happening in this economy. And that needs to change. And I congratulate the Reserve Bank governor for being stern to say these bank charges should go down. Because they should make profit from work, doing some actual work. And that's not what's happening. So I'm challenging again the insurance companies that protect the depositors, protect the transactions, protect the relationships with consumers. Then we'll be able to see each other going some way and somehow. So post-2030, I know right now Andy likes to talk about it like it's an apocalypse or something. The 2030 you're seeing today, 2025, is still going to be the same 2030. The only difference is what decisions will we have made between now and then. Today, I can clearly say, Zimbabweans, welcome to the future that you developed since 2008. This is what you gave birth to. So everything you're complaining about, it's your fault because you were alive in 2008. We are here together. And Zimbabweans, you need to start trusting those who make decisions for you. And the first level which shows that you do not trust your leaders is when you don't know your own councillor. Seriously. Raise your hands, those of you who know their councillors. You see, the rest you are just living. You and tourists, the same fanan. Because you don't even know your own councillor. Because the Constitution says we have 3 tiers of governance. The first one is local government, meaning that a councillor is a legislative making body. Now I'm talking devolution. So the first interface you see to government is your councillor. Because they address the issues in your street. The second interface of leadership that you see is your member of parliament. Raise your hands, those of you who know your member of parliament. Not from next door, your member of parliament. Yeah, I see some of you putting your hands down. That means that when you want to talk about your entire area, you are now talking about your MP. Because they can now talk to you. And government has done something well. We've now introduced between the councillor and that person and the MP, the provincial councillors. And they become the little parliament for your province. So as much as the government is putting in all these legal frameworks, it needs to be matched by the business acumen. It needs to be matched by the confidence coming from the citizenry. And that's how you get involved, and that's how you know what is going on around you. So, in ending, this country is moving somewhere, and we are what I would call the 2 Ps. Media, please quote me correctly because this can be controversial. The 2 P's simply means payslip or product. That's where Zimbabwe is going. It's either when Zimra knocks on your door, you work somewhere, and your $2,000 you earn a month equates for what you have. And you can translate your wealth and explain yourself. Or it's either you have a product that you sell, 10 suits a week or whatever, and they can see the receipts and the profitability, and they can tell how you made your money. These days of people waking up with miracle money are gone. We have to build our country on solid foundation. And these days of celebrating mediocrity will soon go, because we cannot continue to celebrate artificial growth. Zimbabweans, very soon, you will realize that what you're doing now is what your fathers used to do. The essence of celebrating a businessman was not the wealth or how his family lives, is how big the stomach was. You remember? In every rural area, you had that uncle with the big stomach who owned the shop at the Growth Point. And that was the indicator. Remember? And what is it different from what we're doing now on social media? Celebrating people for wealth, but if I ask you, what product do they sell? You can't answer me. Celebrating people who are going on very expensive holidays, and if I ask you, what did they sell? Where did they work to earn that money? You can't answer me. That means at some point we have to normalize this mediocrity and abnormality of economic growth in shadows if this country is going to work. Every Zimbabwean needs to do their part to ensure that we bring back the prosperity in an honest, transparent, and fair manner. That's what this country needs. And that's what you financial service people need to do. You need to account to us. And we need to have confidence that your banks and your insurance companies will be there 30 years from now, are waiting for my retirement. That needs to be done. But if I'm not sure that this animal called Old Mutual will be there 30 years from now, you will not see a cent of my money. And right now, unfortunately, 70% of the country are simply saying there's nothing to live for anymore. That's why that 70% is investing in funeral policies and not health and pension. So let's work together as government and private sector to change the narrative. When we call for policy discussions, come to the table. When you hear that CZI has got an annual congress, go and attend. When you hear that ZNCC, National Chamber of Commerce, is having a meeting, go and attend. When you hear that local council, Mayor Mafume, is having a town hall about the budget, go and attend. That means when we go to 2030, you will be part of the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me an ear, and I hope I have not said anything to distort the narrative of today, but just to encourage you that Zimbabwe is a great nation. We're built on great principles, and I believe we have a story of resilience to tell to the rest of the world. May God bless you and prosper you as we build a better Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. Will you take a few questions, or just very quickly? Thank you. Please give him a big round of applause, PS Muguti. Right, ladies and gentlemen, PS has agreed to take a few questions from the floor. So, let's open it up. There's a lot that was spoken of. I probably believe, PS, that the way you describe insurance in South Africa, I'm uninsurable. Right, we have some fantastic questions from the floor. Right, can we have someone with microphones, please? Oh, Mitchell? All right, okay, well, you know what? I don't want to be as tall as the PS. Let me do this. Okay, right. Sandra.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, PS. Exciting presentation, and I think you've been challenged by your daughter, which is quite good in what you're doing, and we applaud you for that. I was equally excited when I raised my hand to say, yes, I come from Harare West. Our councillor is Denford Ngadziore. Our MP is Mamombe Joanna. And also I've got my roots in Mashonaland East, and our councillor is Mr. Kabanda. And our MP is Farai Jerry. So I am well-versed, and I also participate in those conversations. We are always taking them to task because we have them in our local groups, which is good. I think when you spoke of confidence, this is something that we're grappling with from the pension sector. And we really need solutions, and I was equally excited when you said, my office is open. I'll be one of those coming to your office, and I'll bring with me, I'm sure one of my counselors here is Linda. She's there. We are going to be at your office, and we really want to talk about this, to say, how can we build confidence, as you've highlighted, to say people are busy investing in funeral policies instead of their savings. But when you look at these issues, we are saying, what happened for us to lose confidence? What is really the problem? So we are coming back and saying, PS, what really is the problem? What happened? Yes, we want to focus on the future, but can we look at the challenges that we've faced before? I think from a government perspective, the issues to do with transparency and accountability. Can we be open to the citizens on policies that are always flip-flopping? Each time a statutory instrument is issued, we are all found wanting. We are all back in our strategy boardroom saying, what should we do? So this is something that we've been grappling with. Economic stability, I will not go over and do on this point. It's something that we're asking for from, as a citizen and even from the pension sector. Public service, let's have a public service that is working, from education, from the health sector. Like you highlighted, let someone just walk to Gomode, get attention and be assisted. Let someone walk to Parenya Twatumpilo, be assisted. Even education, I know there's BEAM, but we've been reading in the newspapers that government is failing to pay for BEAM for education. So it's some of these things, the spirit and the rule of law in some of these things that we need to incorporate. So, peers, generally, I don't know if there are questions or they're just additions and comments to your presentation to say we appreciate. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I saw someone, Ambassador Callon, I think I saw someone else's hand. Am I missing? Okay, Ambassador.
Yes, first I want to say a big thank you to PS. This was an excellent motivational speech. And Zimbabweans should be very happy that they have a brother who can stand in the podium of that nation and speak like this. Exactly. Yeah, I think this is really good. And PS, that could easily have cost $150,000 if you have got the right color and speaking to the right audience. So you can imagine the knowledge you have transferred. But let me paraphrase the issues you have articulated there. And I think if there's a takeaway, and when you write your book, I'm sure we'll cross paths on some of the issues. I think one thing you mentioned, which is quite critical, that is one, that development is an attitude. Two, development with transformational change requires empathy. And when you think with empathy, you put yourself in a situation to understand issues from others' perspective and also own challenges and opportunities in forging progress ahead. So your speech was so relevant, and you resonated on the critical elements around empathy in transformation. You talked about confidence, you talked about trust, and then you talked about the last one. Where did I write it? You talked about attitude, which is the central theme of it. So I think it is so motivational that if you crystallize that strategic focus, it comes back to what the PS has told us. Zimbabwe is not going to move anywhere without Zimbabweans taking the bold step to actually transform their country and their economy. That attitude is required to build the confidence that is required, that has been demonstrated by the PS here. But I'm so happy to see Africans starting to talk like this, and being very clear about issues. To me, this is lecture piece 005. It costs $150,000. We might send a check to powers to be that more Zimbabweans who can talk like this need more motivation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, you can always send the check to me if you like. P.S. On top of that, you also touched a little bit on accountability. I think that's also a good topic. Let me hand over to you to answer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much to the two speakers, Brother Ed Killen and my sister. Today in the morning, I think around 7 in the morning, I got a call from a distraught lady, and she says, P.S., I'm sorry for calling on your phone. A white lady. But your office said that if I do not get assistance where they sent me, they would make sure they get an appointment with you. And she said, we are a number of us, but we're so desperate. Please, we need to meet you. Then I said, don't apologize. Tell me what is the problem. So she says, I'm from Avondale, think what something, and we've got this big problem that we have, and no one is listening. And leadership is personified by empathy. If I did not have a heart for that woman, I was simply going to say, please go back to my PA, and we'll see you, we'll make a plan. But I took time, which made me get a bit late today, and I was supposed to pick someone on the way here. And I had to apologize to that person because I had to take time to listen. The element of accountability is not something that you place on someone else. Accountability starts with you. So, we want better services from City of Harare, but we don't want to pay the bill. We want medicines in Parinyatwa and Salim Mugabe, but we do not pay any taxes. And when you look at the narrative, a person who refuses to be accountable is the best narrator of any excuse. If I ask you right now, why are you not paying your ZESA bill? You will tell me, Mageta Nwend. Power goes. Then I'll ask you, what about the time power comes? If I ask you right now, why are you not paying the City of Harare? You say they don't collect my bins. Then I've always asked people, what started first? You not paying, them not collecting, what started? And the best narrator of any excuse to remove accountability on themselves will say they started it. So it remains to be a vicious cycle where we never get to an end. I will not pay them, they will not collect my bin, so be it. And before you know it, Zimbabwe is now coming on videos as the number 1 or number 2 dirtiest place in the world. Because we just cannot have the sense of accountability. And as it is, Dr. Cullen is saying, yes, thank you for the motivational speech. Yes, indeed. Because as government, our responsibility is to sell one product with an H that is called hope. If I stand here as a government leader, and after my speech, you don't feel a tiny bit of hope, that means you do not have any confidence in this government. And we'll see you in 2028 or beyond. But what is necessary is that we need to first understand that accountability starts with us. We saw banks closing because they spent depositors' money. We saw insurance companies close, reinsurance companies, because they abused insurance funds. We're reading daily of lawyers who are being arrested because they spent money in the trust account. Accountability is the new air that we need to breathe. Because without a sense of accountability, anything we plan has got no foundation to lay on. There has to be a sense of accountability. Even when you create your products, ask yourself, bankers, insurance companies, what am I adding to this country? Because as long as you look at your profit margin and there's no empathy for the people, then it doesn't work. I know Sam was telling me about the percentages of risk profiling, and he said, look, the margin in Zimbabwe is very small, but this is who we are. We are a country with 25 years of economic sanctions. We cannot borrow. That's the reality. The fact that we are somehow succeeding through it does not negate the fact that there are certain things our neighbors can do that we can't do. The fact that we can't make payments and offer taking our funds away does not make it not true. But it does not make sanctions be a legal excuse for us to underperform and not think. In the fact that we are in and under sanctions, something has to give. And the only thing that we have as Zimbabweans is us. We are educated enough, we are resilient enough, so surely we can be able to create an economy. So my office is always open, but as government, I wish also that every other door is also open, so that I don't have to address issues that your councillor has to fix. And I think when we are doing that, then we are all being accountable. That's why I asked you that, are we being accountable? If I was going to knock on your door today as Zimra and say, Sam, let's go through your financials. Can you tell me how you bought this property, how you did this? You should be able to explain. In Zimbabwe, I think 99% of us will not be able to explain, because the element of accountability does not exist anymore. We want others to be accountable to us, but we don't want to be accountable to them. And we don't want to be held to account. So Zimbabweans, that's why I said attitude is the new air that we breathe. And that should help us.
I did like that comment about we're in a safe mode, talking about innovation, talking about using our young minds, and as well bringing in women, the youth, into this conversation, because of course, you know, no one can be, everybody can be innovative. Ladies and gentlemen, any final questions? There we go. There's two questions, one there, and then thank you. Please introduce yourself as usual, and can you keep your questions?
Yeah, sure. It won't be a comment. Afternoon, engineer. My name is Adlife from Old Mutual. Since you said in your office you cover absolutely everything, I wanted to ask two things. One, consolidation of regulation around the ease of doing business. We have several regulators, and some of them regulate on the same thing in a different way. How fast are we moving to consolidate all these regulations, particularly in the context of what we discussed around AI? I'm sure in a few months, every regulator will wake up and have some sort of regulation around AI, and there'll be 5 SIs from 5 regulators. So what are we doing around consolidating regulation and supervision? The second one was around, again, ease of doing business, particularly in the deeds office and the stability of the sector and so on. I think we spoke about tokenization, properties and so on. There is some work that's going on around the deeds office and several pieces of work being done around security of tenure on various types of properties. How fast are we moving around that particular office? Because it underpins a lot of financial structures. Thank you.
Thank you. Final question, unless there's anyone else. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Violet Trevimbo Katio, and I'm the head of exploration for UNDP Zimbabwe. So I loved the fact that we brought in universities in the conversation and how universities can contribute to innovation. So my questions or maybe comments are, from the work that we're doing as UNDP, we have been doing ecosystem mapping. We have been also working a lot with startups that are coming from different hubs and universities. But we understand that, we see that there are a lot of brilliant innovators, but most of the prototypes remain in the labs. And there's not enough funding to support the scaling of these innovations. So how can we create structured pipelines where regulators, capital markets, banks can actively test, adopt innovations developed by universities? The second one is, could a multi-regulator sandbox also include university innovators so that their ideas are stress tested alongside private sector startups rather than being left behind? And this also speaks to a startup bill. In Zimbabwe, I'm not sure if we do have a startup bill or a startup act, but I think it's something that we also need to look at in order for us to support the innovations, innovators that are coming from different institutions. Then the second one is on ecosystem strengthening. The startup ecosystem in Zimbabwe is very fragmented. Everybody's working in silos. So I think my question to you and also everybody who's here is, what role can partners, regulators, and industry players come together and engage in clear standards for marginalized communities and also supporting startups and universities? And then, what frameworks can we build where university innovators and startups are merged with banks, insurers, capital markets, markets, players to co-create real products so that these innovations don't just die. Because what we see is there's a gap between industry and what is happening within university hubs. How do we bridge the gap? What role can we all collectively play, not only as government, but also as development agents, as also private sector, so that we don't frustrate our innovators, but we encourage our innovators to grow and thrive so that they can contribute to the development of our nation. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Violet. Some very, very good questions there. And then we had the final, was that the final one? Yeah, that's your final question, PS. Sure, go for it.
Let me just answer you whilst it's still fresh in my mind, and I'll start with you from UNDP. So the president made a call for all our universities to be innovative. And this call has been very much cemented. We saw during COVID how we ended up not having to import things and we're making them locally and etc. A couple of years back, one of my closest friends was the PS Kundishora, who was retired now, Engineer Sam Kundishora. What many people don't know is when Sam Kundishora was overseas in one of the Scandinavian countries, back in the 80s in university, one of the labs was challenged by youth development partners to look into innovativeness. And that Scandinavian university, which Sam was part of, Kundishora is Zimbabwean, developed the magnetic card that you now use in hotel doors. Did Sam start a company for magnetic doors? No. Sam innovated, and the trademark was passed on to industry, and thousands, hundreds and thousands of doors, if not millions today, have got that technology of magnetic swipe to this day. The challenge that we have in Africa is that when one person starts taking care of chickens, the next door will also start taking care of chickens. The other one will start taking care of chickens. No one thinks of starting making the feed for the chickens. No one thinks of starting to start a butchery to sell the meat and the eggs. And we've watched this space now in the innovation gap, where universities are trying to go into business. No, that's not their space. You need to challenge as UNDP, the University of Zimbabwe. Right now, we've got 95% of our traffic lights are not working as Harare. With all the engineers, 4,000 plants. I'm a member of the institute and I know we have thousands of engineers. We have 95% of traffic lights in this country are not working. And it is you, UNDP, who would challenge the electronics department of the University of Zimbabwe and say, create something. But when they create it, they patent it. The laws are there. They pass it on now to Mukonitronics, who starts manufacturing these things, and the uptaker is the government and city of Harare, wherever, and there's a market, but the innovation was created. It dies in the lab when you start making a product and then you want to compete with the people you made the product for. That's why it's dying in the labs. So the biggest budget today of Huawei is R&D. The biggest budget of Samsung today is R&D, research and development. The biggest budget of Microsoft today, research and development. They go to the universities, Stanford, MIT, give them grant funding, and they come up with solutions. Then they commercialize them, and they pay them royalties for their thinking. So that's how African universities can go by. I'll give you one fundamental area which UNDP needs to look into. Africa still remains the botanical library of the world. In Africa, you've got medicines from our grandmothers passed on to our grandfathers, generation to generation, that you know. And we saw all of us, even the new salads, knew something called Zumbani. It didn't start now. It's always been there. I grew up drinking Zumbani tea. Can you imagine if you funded African universities to go into their botanical gardens and look at plants which can stop cancer? Are you telling me we will not find a solution? We'll find it. The question is, if the university tries to then open a pharmacy, then we have a problem. But if they stick to research, then pharmaceutical companies, big pharma, can pay the money. Ideally, a research institution or an educational institution around the world does not need funding from the state. It just needs to survive on grant funding because it's doing learning and research. Learning and research. And so that's one area So, my dear, we can look at the ecosystem. You can map it from here to Timbuktu, but as long as the mapping is not the left hand passing on to the right, then we're not going to go anywhere. The same with innovations. Research studies. If you go around the world, they'll tell you that AIG, Aon Insurance, they fund universities in Norway, around the world, to do research about how they can innovate themselves. Sam, what is our budget on research as Old Mutual? Research doesn't mean to go to Nyanga, Troutbeck for a workshop. No, it means who are you funding to go into the market to research for you, so that when you sit back, you've got third-party data that you can analyze. Statistics that are not motivated to spruce up your egos in the corporate world, but statistics that tell you the reality. When we grew up with CSE, Samson, nyama inotaura yoga. And nyama inotaura yoga, Old Mutual. First Mutual. All of you guys. When I go where I'm going, I should be able to talk about you when you're not there. So this is the ecosystem that we want. And the multi-regulatory sandbox, I'm not a firm believer. Think tanks, yes. Regulatory, there has to be a referee in a game. And that's the government. The government cannot be a player. The government, however, needs to have social safety nets. We have made the mistake as African governments of giving away social services to be privatized. We've privatized schools. We've privatized hospitals. We've privatized all the social basic elements that we need. And as a result, we lose control. So a good governance system means that you, as UNDP, need to help us to regain those safety nets. Let me answer my brother from Old Mutual. And I'm hoping Sam is the one who gave you this question so that he doesn't have to ask me. So you have to understand that 80% of African governments are working with legacy law. 80% of African governments today, if not more, are working with legacy law. In other words, colonial law. And very few have managed to tweak those 1968, 1982, 1971 policies into the modern day era. So even some of our driving laws applied back then, some of them don't apply now. They don't apply now. I'm imagining in countries where they've got trams and you're driving and you're busy taking out your hand to say, I'm going to signal to go right. It'll be hit by a tram. I'm just imagining which laws we need to tweak. So this element of saying we need to consolidate regulatory frameworks is not something that is going to happen overnight. Why? Because you've got a government architecture from colonialism which survived on the taxation of services. But then you have countries like Dubai where the government survives on taxation but not on service delivery. So that paradigm shift means that government has to lower until we get to a point where a birth certificate is free. But we have to get to a point where we up the game to say if we are removing these revenue streams, then you and I need to make sure we increase these other revenue streams. So it's not about sweating more taxes on the 25%. That is almost being like as if we are punishing you. It's about increasing the tax base. So more effort needs to be put in making sure that we have more people paying their taxes so that we have less services which are being paid across intermediation. In terms of security of tenure, go to Botswana, Mozambique, Zambia, and I wanted to not talk about Namibia, but I've got an executive from Namibia here who I invited to come to this so that she can just hear how Zimbabweans talk. And she's here, and I'm sure she's enjoying herself. Go to Namibia. I think it's 80%, right? Yeah, she's nodded. 80% of Namibian land is under a German title deed. 80% of Namibia is under one title deed, which is sitting in Germany. And I think Faisal said something very good. Zimbabweans pagone kwatendaiwo. You are the only country where you've got the largest majority of black people who own land, who own farms, who own the means of production. South Africa does not have one black man who owns a bank. In this country, you are now saying the land we gave you for free, we're now giving you a title deed. And some of you muguri mauswa. Panacha muguta mafamigo. But you're now getting a title deed so that you can go to the bank and borrow and be securitized. It's going to be a journey. But we need to appreciate the foundation that has been laid politically, historically, and where we are today. So that tomorrow when you have that land, you don't cut it up to be residential stands. You understand that a farm produces food for my nation, and I'm obliged to do that. Thank you. I hope I've answered.
That's great. Thank you so much, PS. And I think, Violet, thank you for that. Big round of applause. And I think to add to you, Violet, your questions, I think a sandbox, it will be good to include innovators in the sandbox. That makes sense. Young innovators, universities, and so forth. Why not? And also startup actors is another issue. And of course, business must also go to the innovations and hubs and say, this is our issue. Can you solve it for us? So business can go to the hubs to get innovative. Big round of applause, please. Hafazo Maguti, Permanent Secretary for Presidential Affairs and Devolution in the Office of the President and Cabinet. Now, he has a quick token of appreciation for you, please, sir. So, if I may ask the old mutual. Please, a big round of applause. P.S. Maguti, excellent speech. As you said, food for thought. Thank you very much indeed. While he's giving a token, I'll tell you an interesting story. I did an interview once, and I was talking to someone who does intellectual property. And we were talking about Mahewu. You know Mahewu, of course, right? Thank you. Big round of applause for the PS. Thank you, PS. So we were talking about Mahewu. Now, did you know, this is the most incredible thing you'll ever hear in your life, I think, because I was shocked. Did you know that the process for making Mahewu is owned by a Norwegian company? Did you know that? Yeah. If you want to make Mahewu outside of Zimbabwe, you have to go to a Norwegian company and ask for their permission to make it the way that we make it. That shows you as well, we're also slacking as Zimbabweans. All right. Whoa, we have a lot to go, Patrick.
That's a 5-minute break.
Yeah, should we take a bit of a break, or should we continue straight in? Yeah. Right, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, 5-minute break, ladies and gentlemen. 5 minutes, it's now, we reconvene at 10 past 3. It's about 4 minutes. Just take a stretch, stand up, take a health stretch. Thank you. And we'll now, after the break, Ambassador Callon will come and give his speech.
Let's aim to be concise and succinct with our contributions so that we can still finish in good time, but also still make impact with our contributions.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move in. Now, as you know, we did break down today into 3 specific segments. We've had the PS who was talking confidence later on, but he had to speak earlier because unfortunately he had to leave us. But we are now going to look at the second pillar of our conversation today, which is inclusion and formalization for the digital age, rethinking that. So our keynote speaker of this segment, please join me. Put your hands together for the UN Resident Coordinator in Zimbabwe, Ambassador Edward Callon. Thank you. Big round of applause. Thank you. Oh, you can do better than that, ladies and gentlemen. You can do better than that.
He will be responsible. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know this is a very difficult time of the day, after lunch and after that energetic, motivational interaction with PS and all the great inputs we have received so far today, it's all kept resonating with me that there is a human element in transformation, and that if we are going to make progress in transformation, we must be able to understand that human face or human element, as the case might be, and be prepared to actually bring them at the central stage of whatever we are planning to do. The PS said a lot, and I'm a big admirer of what he was saying, because a lot of them made sense, not only for Zimbabwe, but for Africa in general. The salutations are many, but the protocol has already been established. But let me recognize our host, Mr. Sam Matsiketi, the Group CEO of Old Mutual Zimbabwe, and then my former old colleague there, who I also really admired listening to him after a long time, Dr. Fayaz King, who is an independent non-executive director, digital transformation, telecommunication, information technology, and digital economy leader. Zimbabwe, you are lucky. That's one of the brains in these areas in the world. And he deserves a big hand. So I will ask to stand on the existing protocols already established. But a salutation to ladies and gentlemen is always in place. I would like to open with the story of Amai Ruvarashi. This is not the real name because I want to ensure there is privacy. Who was a hard-working farmer from a rural area of Mashonaland Central. Amai Ruvarashi has tilled her land for decades, feeding her family and contributing to her community. Yet, she operated entirely outside the formal economy. This simply meant no access to credit, insurance, or even a verifiable record of her contribution. Amai Ruvarashi's story highlights the stake we are discussing today: the exclusion of millions from economic empowerment due to the barriers of formalization. But what if formalization could work for Amai Ruvarashi? What if we could empower those like her instead of adding to their challenges? Distinguished delegates, friends, colleagues here, the reality in Zimbabwe today is that formalization is often perceived as a burden, a complex, costly, and distant process fraught with mistrust. The cost involved can be prohibitive. The complexity can be overwhelming. The distance, both physical and bureaucratic, creates further obstacles. Fundamentally, there is often a trust gap, a sense that formalization benefits the limiting access. No, I take back that statement, that formalization benefits the system more than the individual, which is the central core of the dichotomy here, and that these barriers have significant consequences, limiting access to livelihoods, hindering the protection of rights, and stifling economic growth. Friends, however, formalization does not have to be this way. We need to fundamentally shift this convoluted perspective. We must enhance what I'm calling today a people-centered, principle-based approach, which builds formalization around four critical elements. One, proportionality. Formalization tailored to the specific needs and capacities of individuals and businesses. Two, interoperability. Seamless connecting various systems and databases to reduce redundancy and improve efficiency. Rights respecting, which is upholding the rights and dignity of all individuals with clear mechanisms for resource and redress. Most importantly, this shift must create value from the beginning. The million-dollar question is, how do we make this shift happen? Digital tools and AI offer unprecedented opportunities to transform formalization. And how does this happen? It's done by accessible onboarding through user-friendly interface and multi-language support, and also AI-powered chatbots for instant support and guidance, data privacy and protection, ensuring consent is informed and respected, and of course, leveraging data to continuously improve formalization process. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Zimbabwe, from our assessment, has a robust Data Protection Act and recently launched the e-regulation portal and the Sustainable Development Goal portal. Additionally, the government of Zimbabwe, with support from the UN, has produced and launched key assessment and programs, including the e-trade readiness assessment, the National Productive Capacity Gap Assessment, and the Holistic Productive Capacity Development Programs. These tools and studies aim to streamline investment procedures and ensure that essential information is easily accessible to all. Such transparency not only alleviates investor concern, but also promotes formalization by providing reliable, rigorous, and comprehensive data through these platforms. This, as far as I'm concerned, will help attract both domestic and international investment. These initiatives, as you are all aware here, align with Zimbabwe's Open for Business policy by enabling investors to carry out procedures online. The platforms improve efficiency and reduce bureaucratic obstacles. We expect these efforts to significantly enhance Zimbabwe's ranking in the ease of doing business, thereby encouraging increased formal investment. Friends, today we are gathered here to explore a vital shift in our approach to economic inclusion. That is rethinking formalization for the digital age in Zimbabwe. This, as far as I'm concerned, isn't just a theoretical discussion. It's about practical, impactful strategies that can transform lives and accelerate national development. In the digital era of today, formalization is no longer a distant goal, but an achievable reality, which is demonstrated through tangible examples across Zimbabwe and beyond. Let me give you an hypothesis here. Consider the sector of smallholder farmers, a backbone of the rural economy of Zimbabwe. What we have known from analysis is clear. Digital platforms can connect farmers directly to markets by bypassing traditional intermediaries. This direct link can immediately result in tangible results. And from our analysis, they are as follows. 1, a 20% increase in the number of smallholder farmers registered for mobile banking services. And this simply means more farmers are accessing savings, credit, and insurance products tailored to their needs. 2, a 15% reduction in the time it takes for new businesses to register via online portals. And this simply implies faster registration process, lower barriers to entry, encouraging entrepreneurship. And 3, a 10% increase in women-owned businesses accessing formal credit lines. Digital credit platforms, from our analysis and assessment, provide women entrepreneurs with opportunity to grow their ventures without the hurdles of traditional bureaucratic processes. Linking Amai Rivarashi to a mobile or similar digital platform to register a small farm can enable her access microcredit, expand her operations, and employ more other women, as the case might be. Such stories could exemplify how digital formalization can catalyze individual and collective prosperity. I am sure my colleagues from FAO, ILO, UNDP, UNIDO, and WFP could provide more successful examples from the field of changed lives and livelihoods. To translate these successes into nationwide change, we need a clear actionable roadmap with short-term pilots and long-term commitments. As we say in the academia section, to facilitate organic discussion, I can propose an hypothesis of a 90-day pilot for a simplified digital registration for informal traders in Harare. Imagine a streamlined, user-friendly, mobile-based registration process for informal traders. Features could include easy online application with minimal documentation, clear protection for traders, data and business rights, and real-time feedback and support. This pilot can serve as a learning laboratory, allowing us to refine workflows, address challenges, and demonstrate impact. This must be followed by a 12-month commitment framework that could include government and regulators, simplifying and harmonizing regulations to support digital registration and formalization, as well as promoting policies that incentivize digital compliance and reduce bureaucratic red tape. 2, employers and industries such as Old Mutual, Econet, Net1, etc., can invest in digital literacy and skills development programs tailored for informal workers and small business owners to facilitate access to affordable devices and internet connectivity, especially in rural areas. 3, social and development partners such as ZNCC, CZI, UN entities, and bilaterals can invest in robust digital infrastructure, including reliable internet and mobile network coverage. They should support capacity building initiatives, including training on digital tools, cybersecurity, and data privacy. Having said this, how do we measure success with clear public matrices? To ensure accountability and continuous improvement, from our analysis, we must and should track number of first-time users accessing digital formalization services, service quality rating from users, assessing ease of use, clarity, and trust, percentage of users remaining engaged with these services after 1 year. These metrics help demonstrate progress and highlight areas needing attention. If we get this right, millions of Zimbabweans, small-scale traders, farmers, entrepreneurs will gain access to the legal protection, market visibility, and economic opportunities they deserve. Friends, digital formalization isn't just about technology. It's about empowering our people, fostering inclusion, networking, and building resilience. Digital and artificial intelligence, as far as I'm concerned, are powerful enablers supporting our collective goal of formalization. This aligns with the United Nations reform agenda under what we call UN 2.0 framework, which focuses on 5 key areas: data, innovation, strategic foresight, digital transformation, and behavioral science. It is important to remember technology should reflect and uphold societal values, serve humanitarian objectives, and help bridge developmental gaps. We must foster an economy where AI complements human efforts, promotes innovation with societal benefits, and equips citizens with the skills needed in an AI-driven world. No doubt, AI can be a catalyst for inclusivity, reform, and progress in vital sectors such as agriculture and education, while also addressing emerging ethical and governance challenges. It's urgent that we harness human creativity to reshape our economies and societies, ensuring AI serves the best of interests of humanity. It is vital to have a people-centered approach, prioritizing human needs and values over technology. This approach places humans at the heart of technological development and services. In conclusion, by embracing digital innovation and reimagining formalization, Zimbabwe can unlock the vast potential of its informal sector, creating a future where economic participation is accessible, safe, and beneficial for all. With this, I will yield back to the floor to the esteemed members of this room, business leaders, guided by the government of Zimbabwe, to reflect on the decisive steps we can take over the next 12 months to unlock Zimbabwe's potential for formalization and inclusive growth through the adoption of digital technologies and artificial intelligence. I think I will stop this, but I will end with one thing. I know side hustles are important to make ends meet. But if you think that informal sector is what is going to oil the engine room of economic growth in Zimbabwe, I am sorry. It's going to take a long, long, long time. I think the earlier speaker talked about accountability. And the question here is, how are we going to be accountable to ourselves and to our people? Thank you very much. I hope it was not too technical.
It was absolutely perfect. Ambassador Calon, UN Resident Coordinator, Zimbabwe. Ambassador, thank you. I don't know if you want to take some questions here or go and sit and then you can take a few questions. Oh, you'll sit there. Okay, no problem. Right, Ambassador has agreed to take a few questions, but please give him another round of applause. He was very clear. He gave a clear roadmap and ideas for government, for industries, as well as, of course, for social partners. Clear, actionable roadmap. Let's start with a 90-day pilot for informal traders. That goes into a 12-month one, getting rid of red tape, industry, digital literacy, looking at small business, workers, and so forth. And, of course, social development partners invest in robust digital infrastructure. And one of the things that's come through in a lot of the speakers is that they all state that one of the success factors is tracking first-time users and also tracking how many users remain or come back to the platform. In other words, they don't just use it once and then disappear again. Now then, so let's open up a few questions.
Andy, may I interrupt you? My apologies.
Of course.
The PS would like to take leave shortly, so he'd like to offer some comments before he leaves.
Please, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. PS?
Thank you very much. Just to buttress what my older brother, Dr. Calon, has just said, we are only as good as the level of our exposure, Doctor. That's why you find when escalators first came to Zimbabwe, many people were afraid to get on them because they'd never seen them. Today, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria have reduced the informal sector tremendously through digital innovations. Gone are the days where we believe someone needs to go to the tax office to register. And I believe these are some of the innovations that we should invest in. But I'd like to comment further that we are so blessed in Zimbabwe. I'm not saying it because he's a good friend of mine. When you look at tangible innovations and tangible things that have been done by the United Nations in Africa, Zimbabwe stands apart. We are right now, to those of you who don't know, through his innovation and his great team, Dr. Ayo and others, you will find that Zimbabwe now is being used as a case study in the United Nations, where people are coming here to learn about rural electrification, all the way from European countries and other countries we never thought would come. Just right now, you go to Dete. In Dete, they've managed to put an entire solar plant, which is now just powering up an entire growth point. And where there was only one shop with a candle, it's a boom now of economic activity. But it is places like that where we need such innovations, where those growth points can become bank agencies. They can become agents for Old Mutual for people to take pensions using digital infrastructure. The brand is then controlled on a digital level and not ultimately to say we need brick and mortar. Go across into South Africa, go across even now into partly Botswana. Financial services are sharing infrastructure. In fact, if you go to South Africa, many banks don't even have ATMs and POS terminals on their books anymore because other players have come in and put that infrastructure in marginalized areas. So everything that you're saying, I believe technology is a game changer. I also believe that inclusion can be fast-tracked through digital innovations and that the confidence then is there because there's no middleman. It becomes more transparent. It becomes much more easier. That's why in Zimbabwe people trust the EcoCash app more than they trust a normal bank. Because they know that when I want to call upon my funds, there are no stories. I put in a few instructions, my money comes. And I think that's what Faisal has been trying to say since morning. So I think it is a great initiative, the speech you have given. And I think I'm so glad that yourselves and Old Mutual and the government have partnered now in terms of the green revolution which is coming and which is going to spear up more digital innovations. And just to encourage you that you're on the right track, and may you continue to, until you retire, to give us such wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. Most appreciate that. Right, so just a couple of questions. Open it up. You know me, I always have questions. It's probably my job. Ambassador, there was a question. In fact, this is not my question. The question was actually asked earlier. The UN, of course, is very focused, or part of you is focused on women and youth inclusion. Because when we talk inclusion, we must talk women, youth, people with disabilities, and so forth. So maybe you can talk about what the UN is doing in terms of inclusion when it comes to that. And also, the one elephant in the room when it comes to what we're talking about, whether you're talking ZIG or US dollars, is financing. So I think that's an issue, maybe your comments on financing such initiatives or finding this inclusion. Ambassador?
Thank you for that question. Inclusion is a central theme of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is very much built on one basic principles of leaving no one behind. And here in Zimbabwe, we say leaving no place also behind.
Right.
So inclusion is quite central in whatever the United Nations does in Zimbabwe. And that is why issues like gender equality, creating opportunities for people with disabilities, empowering women in particular, and creating opportunities for youths are central themes in all what we do and fund. A few weeks back, we launched a very small initiative. We call it UN Unite. That looked at about qualified Zimbabweans with disabilities and brought them up for mentorship within the UN system. It was a small start, 15 of them. But to me, the symbolism about it was the issues of inclusivity, and that segment of society is equally important, especially those that have managed to go to the level of tertiary education at best. So these issues are quite central to us, and it's something we promote and support government initiatives at all levels on that. Coming to what are we doing to address gender inequality? I mean, one example I can give is linked to the partnership we have with Old Mutual Investment Group, Government of Zimbabwe, and the United Nations. With $10 million of catalytic funding from the SDG fund, we were able to catalyze a $100 million ZIMREF, Zimbabwe Renewable Energy Program, with Old Mutual. That partnership is a one-to-one matching, wherein UN brought in $10 million, and Old Mutual is matching that to a dollar. There are opportunities for more investors to come on board. The government is seriously considering prescribed assets to support that investment.
Very good.
Moving forward, so that we can have a de-risking element built into that investment. But what is beautiful about that investment? We're talking about providing electricity for rural Zimbabwe, providing electricity for schools, providing electricity for SMEs out there, providing electricity for say health centers, and also contributing to the grid, as the case might be. So the policies and regulatory work is something very much we are doing it. But the ZIMREF is so gender sensitive that is focusing on addressing gaps and inequalities. That's one critical example I do. And that is a blended financing opportunity. Zimbabwe is first in the world. And that, the ZIMREF was launched recently at Sevilla during the Financing for Development Conference. And the interesting thing is that the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General are also big fans of this ZIMREF. So the highest level of lobby from the United Nations is supporting this initiative. And I'm sure Zimbabwe will be a good example moving forward on renewable energy in that regard. So that is one area I'm so happy about. Talking about financing for development. When we came from Sevilla in June or July, I did an op-ed on what Sevilla meant for Zimbabwe. I only encourage people who didn't read it to read it. I started with the basic principles of how domestic resource mobilization should be the fundamental basis before you start talking about innovative financing. Innovative financing, venture capital, impact investment, bonds, green bonds, or whatever name you want to call them, public-private partnership, only thrive in an ecosystem where locally mobilized resources are in place and where national leadership and ownership is stimulated. So innovative financing is not a buzzword, because I go to so many places, people talk about it, left and right. Talk about venture capital, investing partner. At times I think it's a jargon, blue bond, green bond, whatever it is. To me, the center for Africa is that local resource mobilization should be able to catalyze innovative financing, and that complementarity is what we enrich and also mobilize investors moving forward. Let me end by saying something, Andy. Most of you are aware. We are living in a world today where multilateralism that we have been so used to after the Second World War is so constrained. We are also in a world today where multilateralism is becoming so transactional. It's so less strategic and inward-looking and less generous and less rule-based. That's the reality of the world we live in today. So when we are talking about progress and transformation in Africa, I think it's a time we talk about trade over aid, opportunities over dependency, and investment over assistance. That is why I liked the Zimbabwe position in TICAD. Their strategic focus is trade, opportunities, and investment. That's the vehicle for transformation in a country like Zimbabwe. But that transformation has to be inclusive, and Zimbabwe should own it to drive it forward. But we are very concerned about issues of inclusivity and gender equality, narrowing the gap, moving forward. If you compete with female staff and you are all on the same margin, she will get the job. Forget it. She will get the job. Yeah? Okay. Not because the male colleague didn't do very well, but if we can create opportunity for brilliant women, we have to do it. Thank you.
Ambassador Callon, please, a big round of applause. Thank you so much. I think that takes us nicely into our panel discussion, but before I release Ambassador Callon, maybe we can ask for a token of appreciation for him, please. Thank you. Please, a big round of applause for Ambassador Callon. One thing I really liked in his speech was when he talked about people-centered, principle-based approach, tailored to specific needs, interoperability, and right respecting. Please, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause. Thank you very much. UN Resident Coordinator, Zimbabwe, Ambassador Edward Callon. Right, now as he makes his way down, I just want to remind you all, if you didn't know, was that after our Fantastic Days event, just for us to network, that's the nice way of putting it, and unwinding, there will be a cocktail party, so don't go anywhere. That's where you can network and ask our speakers or anybody else any questions you have, so we can continue our discussion, because I'm starting to feel, ladies and gentlemen, that we are making our way forward. Patrick, this Better Future Summit, we're making our way forward now. Good ideas, deliverable ideas, trackable ideas are coming from our speakers, Patrick.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're right on track.
Right, if I may now call our panelists to talk under the Rethinking Inclusion and Formalization for the Digital Age. May I please invite up Chris Mugaga, CEO, Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Please give them a big round of applause as they come. Sekai Kubarika, CEO, Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, CZI, and Mr. Madyanga, Mining Affairs Manager, Chamber of Mines, Zimbabwe. Please, a big round of applause for our panelists. Yeah. Right, ladies and gentlemen, just as our previous panelists will do, we'll give each of our speakers 7 minutes to to just give us their conversational pieces, and then from there we'll break it into a Q&A session. So, without further ado, Sekai, ladies first. Sekai, do you mind coming up and starting off? Please, a round of applause, Sekai Kubarika, CEO, Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries. Do you want to use this? You want to use this or you want to walk? Okay, I'll put this back in your chair.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And allow me to ride on the protocols that have already been observed, and also allow me to leverage on everything that has been spoken about since morning. I'm going to be very short. And I think at the center of this discussion is the issue about a human-centered approach or human-centered systems. When I look at the theme, it speaks about innovation, speaks about inclusion, and speaks about confidence. These are some of the most talked about, but less done about. But in the same vein, therein lies the opportunity for both business and society. So when something is still in conversation, circulation, or maybe is being over-talked about, and there's very little, or maybe there's less on the ground than there is in the conversations, there is actually a huge opportunity that still exists. And that opportunity needs to be seized. While informalization may be an unintended outcome, formalization ought to be by design. I think that we seem to have treated smallness or infancy in our economy and in our economic activities as marginalization and vulnerability, rather than a life cycle stage in the various business sectors or economic activity that we engage in. So as such, you will find that our policy approach initially to small to micro has been to try and provide for inclusion, but almost from a point of these are vulnerable and they need to be protected and they need to be assisted, but not necessarily being intentional to look at the different sectors of our economy or businesses and actually acknowledge that smallness and micro are part of the beginnings of activities in all those sectors. So what has happened is that we sometimes are able to then take charge of some of the challenges they face away from the sectors within which they exist. So when you are addressing small business and you are addressing micro businesses from a micro-focused policy approach, but not from the specific sectors where they come from, they remain vulnerable to the sector policies and sector regulations. Because the policies that govern smallness don't necessarily govern the sectors in which the small entities actually operate. And there's a challenge there. And also recognition that some of the small activities, small economic activities or micro activities are self-employment. And they are subsistence to a great extent and must just be treated as tax-free businesses, because some of them are actually not turning over an amount that is equal to your minimum monthly tax-free threshold incomes. So what do we need for some of these in order to ensure that we start with formalization right from the beginning? Maybe all they need is actually identity in the first place. And just being able to be identified as a business or as an economic activity or actor should provide us with access and with the knowledge of how many economic activities we have and not require anything from them. We just should know where they are and what they are doing. But the moment we tie that identity to obligations that require them to pay taxes, to pay for regulations, which they probably can't afford, then we lose them. And we need to do this for long enough to build just confidence among some of these micro and small enterprises to be able to be willing to be part of an identified lot in the business sector, as it were. So there should not be any repercussions for registration. So registration should actually be incentivized. And we need to do it long enough for them to get comfortable with formalization, to get comfortable with knowing that somebody is going to come and inspect my business, but not require a fee from me for a certain period of time. The moment that that is met with financial requirements that are probably outside of their reach, then we scare them away, and then they remain unaccounted for, uncounted, and probably also unserviced, as it were. Unfortunately, in what we are calling informalization, or informal sector, as it is called, I worry that we actually got to a point of calling this a sector of our economy. In there, we also find that there are illegal activities that also take place in that micro-enterprise space because it is unregulated, it is unmonitored, and part of the reason is that the people that are doing micro-businesses are actually not ready for regulation. And maybe that's not your source of tax. But as long as we can count them, as long as we know where they are, it's a very good starting point to formalization. It is more difficult to address formalization as a way to try and cure informalization. So it is easier to do formalization as a way of doing business, whether somebody is micro, is small, is medium, as long as there are no penalties, as long as formalization does not present an existential threat to them, that maybe tomorrow they will be closed, maybe tomorrow they will require to pay certain regulatory fees that they cannot afford. I'll move on to digital citizens, and we have called them digizens. They are digital citizens. We are still relating with them as the citizens of the past. The world in which commerce was born and existed was a physical world, and the citizens of that world were born of men and women. They were midwifed by midwives in our various polyclinics or in round huts, as in my village, or in other places, on the way to clinics, in Scotch carts, in different places. Today, commerce exists in a different world. It exists in a digital world. And the citizens of this world that we have called digizens are not going to be born of men and women. They are going to be midwifed by corporates, by business. Who is the midwife of these digizens? It is the corporates. So we have a responsibility that as we shift into this digital world, we play the midwife role to make sure that the citizenry of that world moves with us. So we find ourselves in a situation where businesses and corporations have advanced and the citizenry has not advanced as much, and we are trying to pull the citizens into a space that we are occupying, but we have not moved with them. It is easier for inclusion if we also play the role of ensuring that we are midwifing their citizenship, that they migrate into this space where we are doing business, they migrate into this space where we are doing any other activities that we may be carrying out. It will definitely require support in terms of ethics, in terms of fair access, in terms of integrity, accountability, and any other issues that may come in harm's way for our populations as we migrate into this space. It is a space that businesses are existing and transacting in. I also then ask a question. How many businesses actually have community digital service centers, where those in our communities who can't transact digitally because they don't have access either to gadgets, smart gadgets, or they don't have access to data, can actually walk in and carry out their transactions on shared gadgets or other shared services that we may present to them. And this is part and parcel of the midwifery that I'm talking about. We need to be in the communities, supporting our communities to migrate into the space where we are now doing business and where we are accelerating our business activities. I also ask a question. How much product evolution has taken place in tandem with the type of the changing citizen that we are now looking at? So if we look at our products, if we look at our businesses over the past 10, 15 years, is it the same product that we are trying to onboard these people to today, or we have a completely different product that is pointing towards where they are so that we meet the people where they are, as it were? I also think that the digital transition has come with some levels of liberalization and liberties for our populations. They have a lot of access to a lot of information that we ought to create products where we are a highway to certain things that they themselves have decision-making power on, but we provide the ability for them to actually access maybe other investments or other products that are maybe not ours, but we provide a highway because they do have access to open source information that has been talked about earlier on. I see Andy is coming up, so I am just going to ask to talk about the key points in terms of what we could do going forward. I think number one is be fruitful and multiply. Business ought to play a midwife role in creating the digizens of this world. Number two, we need policymakers to move with us when we train our teams or upskill them. What will it take to include some government officials in our upskilling programs? If it doesn't come with significant costs, because the technical people that are in our government departments drafting and crafting the regulations that then govern where we are going sometimes do require this access, and it's not readily available. Incentivize rather than penalize digital transactions. Not all digital transactions are trade transactions. Some are support to families. Co-creation rather than forums for remediation and reaction management is supposed to be the way that we do policy and we do regulations. I would expect that maybe moving forward, we have more forums where we are having policy development challenges that drive our ambitions. I'm happy about the sandboxes that have been mentioned, but we do need more public forums where we are able to actually proffer some innovative ideas around policy and provide the market and policymakers with some options. Lastly, for business and policymakers, I would say it is not us against each other. It is us together against the world, and we can create the environment together. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sakai Kumarika. Please, a big round of applause for Sakai, CEO of CZI. Now we also have the other business body with us today, represented, of course, by Chris Mugaga, the CEO, Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Chris, I hand the floor over to you, sir. Clap hands for him while he's walking to the podium. I must say, he can also do this, he can do this in French if you want him to as well. Right, Chris?
Thank you, and whoever is responsible for this is blind to height. You know, you and I, we are so blessed with height to the extent that my brothers, you can see how I'm struggling to adjust. Thank you.
That doesn't work, does it? Where's my guy?
It's okay. I think I can be heard or I'll hold it. Yeah. No, thank you so much. Allow me. No, don't worry. Allow me to observe protocol. Sam, thank you for inviting us. Leadership, I recognize protocol. I saw my friend Muguti, who was in the room. Quite a very robust. I still consider him a young man. I think he's relatively older than me, but you see the energy is quite very poppy. My brother Kalon and team from UN family, I think I recognize you, fellow BMOs. I'll just carry on from where Sekai left. You know, she spoke about us against the world. So next time also when you invite us, there's only one private sector sale. Just invite one of them and we are done. That's very important. Yes, I mean, look, it's quite a very difficult one. Last time when I was in Nairobi, one thing I noticed, which was quite very common in Nairobi, was tinted vehicles. Almost every kind in Nairobi is tinted. Then I had to go on to ask, but why are your cars tinted? I'm not sure how many of you observed that. And the response was, it's a security measure. Back home, we are removing the security measure. So you see a diversity of preferences. Just taking it, I think what's more significant in I will speak, not necessarily, it's not a PowerPoint. Formalization, I'll be guided by Ambassador Kalon's presentation, obviously being a panelist. Could it be an oxymoronic term to say formalization when you are referring to Zimbabwe? It had become a strange term, obviously, for the simple reason that a 76% underground economy and the agenda of formalization, as we pitch it, what does it mean to each and every one of us in this room? Confidence. Which confidence? What confidence? I think we have to answer that also. Formalization, like Sekai said, is by design. When it's informality, if you ask the creators of informality, they'll openly tell you that we thought the policy would work this way. But what we call in economics, the what? The unintended consequences. Let me be controversial before I go into a few issues I'll raise on the topic to emphasize on one aspect I believe is the harshest, the biggest tax to formalization. I know different views will come, but that's democracy. But that threat to formalization, it is the currency. Maybe we seem to underestimate the downside of having a walking textbook of pathology when you define a currency. It's struggling. How do you tell someone who is saving money in a bank that tomorrow will come, leave your money today? Competition between the pillow and the banking vault. Insurance. If the currency is not certain, how do you tell me that IPEC, I saw my brother from the regulator, how do you convince me that I should insure myself? Indeed, it's no accident what PS was talking about. People preferring insuring their lives, funeral, as opposed to health. They believe death is certain, it's closer to them, versus the certainty. So naturally it becomes, those in funeral business, then you have to take advantage, there's business there. Everyone wants to insure, because they are not sure where to place their currency. Death will come anytime, when you look at the population pyramid. So whenever we talk about formalization, there has to be a solution to currency. It's the basis, the common denominator to any discussion on formality, on confidence. Even people, when you talk about taxes, when you talk about all other variables, if you follow closely, you'll be shocked that they all boil down again to currency. But the taxation issues you raise are, Mutuli is telling you, pay your tax, but pay in the currency of trade. Why currency of trade when ZIG and US dollar, it's $1 equal to 26 point something ZIG? You will not accept. Don't worry, it's safe. He will not accept. You know why he will not accept? Because he accepts that the exchange rate is wrong. Can you see what's happening? The exchange rate is wrong. And if the exchange rate is wrong, you can't have confidence of relying on a certain currency. That's the first thing. Whew. Let me talk about AI. But my brother, Econ, non-executive director, it's something you talk about every day, but it will be of interest. Next time, who is responsible for the podium, make sure it's strong for strong guys, eh? It's very important. Some people are born strong, isn't it? Artificial intelligence, it's capitalism. At one point, I said, let me use DeepSeek. Most of you possibly you know DeepSeek. It's a Chinese what? A platform. Let me just read what DeepSeek said. And most of you, I guess, you also know about the Tiananmen Square. You know the protest in the late 80s. If you go to DeepSeek and say, can you explain what happened to Tiananmen Square and the reasons behind it? This is artificial intelligence, isn't it? We use it every day. I'm asking a question because I want a response. Listen to the response from DeepSeek. I am sorry, I cannot answer that question. I'm an AI assistant designed to provide helpful and harmless responses. What does this mean? What's the moral of what I'm raising? So wherever you are seated when you are pushing an agenda of AI, for starters, yes, it's big data. It's computing power. Where is it coming from? You feed it. But what does it take for us to push AI? There are interesting figures here in terms of power. If you look at power in Zimbabwe at the moment, we are talking of what today is 1,400 megawatts, isn't it? We are producing for 1,400 megawatts. But if you are to talk of proper artificial intelligence, what you need are data centers. And data centers, as I'm talking to you today, in terms of energy consumption, we don't talk of megawatts, we talk of terawatt hours. In fact, if data centers were a nation today, as I'm talking to you, their consumption of power eclipses that of France as an economy. The context is, AI is not just a happy talk where you wake up and say, let's deliberate on AI, because it's the in thing. Fundamentals, same. It is fundamentals. we need to agree to fundamentals. But what does AI mean to a business in Zimbabwe? Surely 76% informality versus AI. There should be a business case for AI, because you should be able to look beyond Zimbabwe. That's AI. Let me just give an interesting statistic. In terms of rich people, look at rich people. When I say rich, I mean wealthy. These ones will not even give you a car, but they are rich. Very, very wealthy. They will not be able to do that. Elon Musk, it's AI. And what is the value of the industry tech today? We are talking of 38 trillion US dollars. The third largest industry in the world, AI, a 17 trillion business. Software, 15 trillion. Tech hardware, 13 trillion. So if you talk of top 10 most valuable industries today, it's artificial intelligence. And as I'm raising it, artificial intelligence, the advantages, it looks beyond that market of 1,400 megawatts. It looks at that market beyond 16 million citizens. Just this morning I was listening to figures on how Zimbabwe is doing well regarding tourism. Why I'm throwing these figures is to challenge each other. You know, when you know where you are, it's easy for the discussion on the upside risk to formalization. Because formalization should be able to bring more to you as a business. Zimbabwe, when you talk of 2024 figures for tourism, it's about what? 1.4 million visitors. Maybe I'm reckless to look at these other countries in Europe, but it's not reckless because we have big force, we have good resort towns. When we talk of UK, same year, where we are talking of 1.4. UK is 295 billion from tourism. You and I, we can even struggle to know what is in UK, which tourists to go and look at. Germany, 488 billion. 2024 figures. USA, 2.4 trillion. China, 1.3 trillion. But if you look at the underlying factor to what drives these figures, someone said when you Google Zimbabwe, it's the message which comes. I know most of you are world travelers. You know, we need to work so hard as a nation. The image we have is not as good as we want. But it's us, you and I, who can create that positive image, which will make it easy to formalize. Part of our lobbying, I always try not to cross the path when it comes to diplomatic engagements. But when one politician who is a senior minister raised the issue of Chinese smuggling minerals out of this country, I became so confident to talk about it because, look, he comes from mining, my brother from Chamber of Mines, but if Chinese are smuggling, what does that have anything to do with what we are talking about here? Sekai, we talk of regulations, levies. If you remove the levies, the fees as a government, to incentivize formalization, one leg you're doing right. But the second leg, the smuggling of the minerals. And those levies will even end up benefiting who? The very individuals we are talking about, more than us. So the story is not just in eliminating levies or taxes. Electric vehicles, International Atomic Agency is predicting that by 2035, it will be a beyond 85 billion business, that alone. But go to the Lobito corridor, Zambia, DRC, Angola, the biggest producers of that metal. It's poverty. How do we formalize when the incentive to formalize is not there? So I think what's more important, firstly, then as I conclude, firstly, we have to accept that what we see with our eyes, even statistics, is not reflective of what is on the ground. So if an economist is sitting in the office at Old Mutual, you should not come to the CEO and say, no, I saw the deposits in the banking sector, total macro, it's 4 billion. So we make a strategy out of that. You can't afford that. It's an informal economy. The underground, the thickness of underground Zim economy is so palpable that you can touch it. Vanilla banking. Hey, you know, bankers, we work with them, these are members, but bankers in the room, I always talk about vanilla banking, you know. Banking in Zimbabwe, it's a case of where is your security? How do we fund AI? When you talk of artificial intelligence, funding the agenda, look at the ecosystem in Silicon Valley, even Rwanda and Africa, Kenya. You need investors, venture capital, who are interested in the field. But when I saw figures in the morning, same about loans, I'm not sure if I can trust those numbers, where most of the loans from most of our banks are going to individuals. I am not sure if I can really rely, but those were the numbers which came. What does it mean? Does it mean we are consumptive? Does it mean we fear tax authorities to the extent that it's better to deal with a tax authority as an individual who is getting a loan in business? What are the issues? Our banking, it needs to shift from vanilla banking, where you get an order finance to import clothes from China. You get an order to deliver, but they still ask for 2-year financial statements. What is that? I think it's important to have such a conversation also. What does it mean? Education system. Yes, I'm hearing a lot, people talking about University of Zimbabwe, NAST. They are talking about, what do you call them? These hubs, innovation hubs. Certainly the idea is amazing, but look at best practices. When you're talking of a successful innovation hub, it doesn't compete, it complements. It should be Dairy Board Zimbabwe, which is so worried about the production cost and what kind of technology they need. And they consult with the university to have the best technology. But what we are having now, when you have a trade fair, it's my dairy board seated here with their milk. The university is also proving that they can also do better. The same will apply to AI. When the agenda of artificial intelligence and what it means to insurance growth in an informal economy is discussed, how many papers are we receiving from the academia? Look at the number of, I always joke and say, I'm sorry, Dr. Kalon. Sometimes I fear the title doctor because there are so many now. And the mistake which is made sometimes, every time I travel somewhere, they call me doctor. When I was in South Africa, they said Dr. Mugaga. And they said, but why are you calling me doctor? I'm not here. Then they said, no, Zimbabwe has so many doctors. How did you miss this one? Well, there are so many doctors in our country. So as I conclude, the agenda on formalization is a difficult one. It's a current issue. Let's fix it. There is every incentive to remain informal as long as you don't know the color of money tomorrow. Any rational player will see it that way. I believe if we solve the current conundrum we are facing today, we are wiping off almost 75% of the problems we are raising today. Just by currents. And so we had fixed it. And I just believe as private sector one day will sit and say there's one agenda. And this agenda is to see a working currency. If I ask any one of you in this room to say, who has got ZIG, the probability certainly is somewhere just below 1%. How do I formalize? The absence of ZIG means I didn't go and exchange it at a ability change. It also means I prefer my US dollar because I can control it without circulating. It usurps the confidence. But this should not push away the agenda on AI. USA, China. If you look at the whole conflict between USA today on tariffs and China, NVIDIA, arguably the biggest company we're talking of in USA. If you talk of valuation of NVIDIA today, it's northwards of $4 trillion. They are the biggest sellers of the H20 chips into the into the China market. And China is the biggest producer of robots, the biggest manufacturer to the world through AI. But when they are fighting their wars on trade are on how do we grow the global value chains on AI to dominate the world. And AI is where the world is going. It's no longer the case of what do you have on the ground. It's a case of how do you convert what is on the ground to something. So you don't go out there and boast to say we have got so and so minerals which are exploitable. The question which AI is pushing is, to what extent can you exploit those minerals at a very minimum cost? That's artificial intelligence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I was of value to you. Thank you.
Chris Mugaga, thank you so much, CEO Zimbabwe National Chamber of Commerce. Thanks, Chris. You know, it's interesting in that both Sakai and Chris, they spoke bringing people into the fold, lessons from the front lines, and of course, designing for inclusion, making formalization accessible and valuable. And we will give a chance to ask a couple of questions after our final panelists. Of course, one of them being what industry will do to boost informalization, some of the steps they will take. But before we get to the Q&A session, speaking to a very important topic, savings as security, building safety nets for workers and communities. And this sector does it very well, of course. I'm talking about the mining sector. So please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Matyanga, Mining Affairs Manager, Chamber of Mines of Zimbabwe. Mr. Matyanga. While we're sorting out the podium, right, thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Andy, and I assure you, you won't have to stand up and push me off the podium. Good afternoon to you all, and may I ride on the protocol of those that came before me. I wish to thank Old Mutual for inviting the Chamber of Mines of Zimbabwe to this forum, and we believe it is a very important forum indeed. The core competencies of the mining industry has traditionally been discovering mineral deposits, building mines, extracting minerals for profitable gain. Promoting financial long-term savings for workers and communities is a new development in the mining industry. Emerging demands from society and the market are guiding the industry to explore innovative ways of creating value for stakeholders. A new business approach has therefore emerged, one that focuses on sharing the value created from value created from mineral extraction. It is considered an international best practice. The extraction of minerals is now expected to result in value creation for multiple stakeholders, communities and workers alike. This value then gives the mineral producer a social license to operate, which is now being considered as the leading risk in doing business in mining globally. To mitigate against this risk, the industry and other sectors have developed the environmental, social, and governance framework, which is a useful tool in managing the social license to operate. In South Africa, the mining investors are required to develop and submit to government a social and labor plan. And this plan is monitored, enforced once approved. And this allows then the mining industry to ensure that the social programs are implemented fully, and that all stakeholders are clear on what the mining industry is expected to do. As you may be aware, the government of Zimbabwe is reviewing the Mines and Minerals Amendment Bill, or rather the Mines and Minerals Amendment Act, to enhance the contribution of the mining industry to socio-economic development of the country. This bill, which is available at Flowprint, provides that mines should undertake certain social programs to ensure that the communities retain value from the exploitation of the minerals within their areas. The mining industry is also streamlining sustainable development goals in their operation with positive impacts on workers and communities. So, what are mines doing to provide safety nets for employees. Most mining companies have employees as their first pillar in their business strategies. Some of the initiatives to provide these safety nets include the following. Mines support employees in securing mortgages for their primary residence. These facilities are undertaken in partnership with financial institutions, and the properties will then be used once the mortgages are paid off to collateralize any loans that they may have or they may take with financial institutions. In Hwange, the Hwange Colliery established the Kula Fund, which provides employees with funds to renovate their existing homes, build new rural and urban homes, or set up income-generating projects. And these projects will sustain their lives after retirement. There are also pooled saving schemes that provide access to long-term savings and for the workers. And this will cover issues like financing ill health and supporting employees during their period of unemployment or in retirement. Mines also operate employee ownership schemes in compliance with the Indigenization and Economic Empowerment Act. Shares in a company are either given by the company or sold to employees through a special purpose vehicle that can then house these shares on behalf of the employees. Employees become owners of the company they work for with such vested interests in the business. The contribution of employees to the success of the business is assured. The Chamber of Mines of Zimbabwe established a Chamber of Mines Pension Enhancement Fund, which is managed by the Mining Industry Pension Fund. And this fund provides additional payments. These are pension payments to retirees to complement what the mining industry pension funds provides. And this provides security in terms of income for retirees. For communities, the mining industry has always implemented social and infrastructure development initiatives aimed at supporting communities in which they operate. These initiatives are always extended beyond the shadow of the mine's headgear and therefore are on 3 tiers. 1, the local community. 2nd, the province in which the mine is located, as well as at a national level. These initiatives cover corporate social investments, which is also sometimes called corporate social responsibility, enterprise development initiatives, infrastructure development, as well as a community share ownership schemes. And under the corporate social investment initiatives, this covers a wide range of activities and initiatives spanning agriculture, health, education, water and sanitation, among many others. These initiatives are framed to establish strong and beneficial and valuable relationship between mines and communities in which they operate. The value from the exploitation of these minerals must be seen to be shared with the communities in which mining is undertaken. On enterprise development, the initiatives are again varied, and these are aimed at establishing enterprises that supply the mines with goods and services. The mines use their strong balance sheets to secure funding for the enterprise and also provide secure offtake arrangements. Such enterprises can then expand to provide services and goods beyond the mine itself. So we have a lot of such enterprises that have been developing in the industry, spanning rock mechanics, spanning areas such as servicing of mining equipment and such other initiatives. There is also the community share ownership trusts that have been established, which are special purpose vehicles that houses shares in mining companies which is then whose shares are owned by the communities. We have the Mondorongezi community share ownership scheme, the Gwanda, Shavani, Chiadzwa, among many others. And these invest in initiatives that generate income, which is then used within the communities to uplift the standards of living of communities. In developing all these initiatives, mines undertake intensive community and stakeholder consultations. These consultations result in a project and program buy-in and support from the communities. I think with that, I'll stop here and hope that we will respond by question and answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matanga from the Chamber of Mines. Ladies and gentlemen, you recall we started the conversation with Ambassador Callon, US representative, really looking at financial inclusion, how to bring women, youth into it, how AI and how digital technology will transform not just our economy, but the way we do business, the digital products, particularly for those not included in the products, those in the rural areas in particular. But now let's open up the floor very quickly to our panelists. So obviously, please, like we have done during the rest of the day, some questions from the audience will be most appreciated. Sakai, I like this idea about your community outreach, with businesses actually being out there so that if there's any issues with business, communities can come and reach out and business can help them. But what more do you think business can do? Let's talk about government, business, social partners. What more can each of them do to drive this financial inclusion agenda, to drive the digital technology agenda, to try and get more people, more of our citizens around the country involved in the digital age? What do you think your members or business can do?
I would say that businesses create economic opportunities, and I think that financial inclusion, besides being in the ecosystem to participate in transactions or be banked, they reward systems are geared for that. So I think there are solutions that we are leaving on the table because we are looking for somebody with a certificate and a degree, and yet a lot of the practitioners in the digital space are actually self-taught to a large extent. They've discovered the opportunities, they know the challenges, and they can solve problems, but they're actually failing to scale some of their solutions because there's a disconnect with our businesses. And also because we are not geared to absorb them and to remunerate or reward that intellectual capital that comes to us, the opportunity to expand economic activities digitally remains limited. So I think businesses also need to have a bit of a shift to connect with that talent and to scale up some of the innovation they are holding. Thank you.
Thank you, Sagai. Chris, let's talk about this. You did talk about innovation hubs, and I think earlier on, Violet from UNDP talked about an ecosystem in which there is a deliberate link between innovation and business, rather than, as you yourself said, innovation actually competing with business. So let's expand on that more. You have industry, you have your industries. If you look back a couple of years, I believe it was over 600 products a year we used to create in Zimbabwe. I think now we're down to 10 in the last 5 years. It gives you an idea how product creation is not a big thing in Zimbabwe, yet it was. Chris, how do you think business can work with whether innovation hubs or innovators, or even with financial service providers, Old Mutual, for example, work with them to come up with products that you see your customer doing, products that you require as business to sell, products that will give you a competitive advantage, because that's what we're talking about here, is bringing uplifting people as well as, of course, creating business opportunities. Chris?
Thank you, Andy. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think working with institutions, business, working with institutions such as Old Mutual is business. So possibly it's one side of the, possibly it's even the same coin. I think the observation, firstly, if you look at those who are doing well globally, I spoke about the Chinese, look at South Korea, look at USA. The statistics I gathered, if you look at the STEM graduates, what gives sleepless nights to Donald Trump when his education advisor is briefing him at White House? It's not the number of people or graduates coming out of their universities. The STEM graduates. Huh? Because when you talk of, for example, AI, you have to be quite very talented. It's technical. The world is going there. That's the reality of it. So I think our conversation with most of our tertiary institutions being, what kind of graduates are we producing first to drive the whole story? But once the caliber of that graduate is compromised, the story, it can even end up with a picture. I don't want to use the word propaganda, but when talent is not there, you know what happens. There's just no talent. So I think it's the curriculum. If Zimbabwe is to push, it has to be clear on the STEM subjects. And secondly, applied research. The Vice Chancellor of the University of Zimbabwe normally jokes and say, I still wonder, but sometimes maybe he could be biased, but he says, I wonder why a professor at a university who is a lecturer will go on strike because he's not content with $250. His argument being, but you're a professor. What took you to professorship? Surely it's research. And surely, I guess there is so much money out there for proper research. At one point, I was having a chat with Sam, you remember, when we were talking about you want to commission a research. But if you look at the output, the product which comes out, it's substandard. But there's a whole title of this person called what? A doctor, a professor. So I think it's interrogating the quality of our education because it will feed into the industry we are talking about. China didn't wake up being that manufacturing hub to the world. It was so intentional. You look at their curriculum from late 70s to date. The idea was clear. There's no way they were going to catch United States of America, Japan, if they spend most of their time. I'm not taking anything away from humanity. I'm not taking anything away from the humanities for those who have pursued, but to drive this agenda we are talking about, you need a certain breed. How do you explain bathrooms being blocked? I'm not my chamber are blocked up by university, but there's a whole engineering department. Those are the issues we are talking about. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but Chris, it doesn't also make sense possibly for business to do what they do overseas. Business puts together money to set up an AI-based sort of course or AI-based initiatives. I know a lot of do that. A lot of businesses get their heads together and put funding for some sort of course. But anyway, Mr. Machanga, thank you. Look, I know the mining sector definitely is one sector that really looks after your people. There's no doubt about it, because I think you notice that the people are actually what you need to mine your product. So you put a lot of housing in there, schooling and so forth. Let's talk about this creation of insurance products. You've got your pension fund, mining industry pension fund. How would you encourage this savings culture? Because of course pensions are a form of savings, but are you finding that in your communities that your mining houses serve, that the saving culture is there, not just amongst your workers, but also amongst their extended families and in the communities around? Or is it more like just spend what you eat? You know, you get your money and you spend it straight away. What are you finding in your communities?
Thank you, Andy. There is definitely a clear policy to try and encourage employees to save. And these various schemes that I've talked about are going a long way towards ensuring that employees save part of their income. Of importance, really, is the evidence of that saving is coming through in the number of mining professionals that have invested significantly in various projects, agricultural projects, engineering projects, some are into property and so on. So there is definitely that culture that is being promoted throughout the workforce. As it regards the communities, there is very little that mines can do to do the encouragement for communities. Maybe that's an area that requires a lot of exploration to find out how best the industry can support the initiatives of communities. But the leverage that mines have on communities is really quite minimal.
Great, thank you very much. Right, I can take it just if there's a question from the floor or any questions from the floor. No? Well, great. I'll call the session to a close. Oh, sorry, Colin. Patrick, do you mind? Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Chris. You mentioned that the biggest problem we have is currency. We all agree. My question is, what is the proposal? What do you see as the solution to this problem? I know it's a monster we have been grappling with for a long time, and situation has been changing and all that. But as of now, what is your recommendation? And that recommendation, how is it being viewed by the authorities?
Interesting question, Chris. Please.
I think after responding, I'll give my colleagues floor to respond to, because when they engage, I'm sure it's a wide issue. I think if you look at the current issue, my brother, it's a problem of the exchange rate. If you look at Zimbabwe since 1997, just during your spare time, just look at numbers from 97, when Zimbabwe had strained in terms of the whole exchange rate management issue. I don't think the collapse of currency in 2008 was a 9 days wonder, which could just create a sensation over that year. It was a combination of years. So when you're giving advice or recommendations, you don't give as if there's a national challenge which just arose. That's for starters. We spoke about it when Gideon Gono was still the governor, before the collapse of the currency even. It was a discussion under Mangujga. Up to now, it's, if you're someone who passed on in 2003 was to wake up and listen to your lobbying, they wondered, what's happening? Where is the lobbying? Still the same tone, same issues. So solution lies in an honest conversation, I think. The challenge with players in the economy is, Chris might be benefiting from, think of it that I've got access to Forex at 26, which possibly you don't have. What does it mean? It means I would defend the status quo at every turn. That's an issue. After the miners surrendered this, and the manufacturers have surrendered their Forex, it's the Forex management then which becomes an issue. So yes, government listens, but in finding a solution, it seems liberalizing the exchange rate is something they are not comfortable with. Maybe it's the short-term pressures to do with inflation which gives them sleepless nights. You know, when we talk currency as business, to us it's a competitiveness issue. It's not about the number of zeros. If you're going to Ethiopia, even countries like Turkey, a manufacturing hub for textile, 6 years ago, Turkey, if you look at the exchange rate, it was $1 to 3 Turkish lira. After liberalizing, we are talking of the exchange rate of around 41, 42 years I'm talking to you now. I don't think they have a problem with that. But for us, I think we made currency a political subject. And once you make it a political subject, you think it needs political solution. Yeah. But I think it's a case of just liberalizing, and possibly you see the consequences.
That's an interesting discussion, because the question is should we actually be talking about the currency? Does it really matter what the currency is? What actually makes a currency stable, steady, and strong? It isn't the currency. It's production. Yeah? So, Sekai, over to you.
So I actually wanted to say that I think we posted something yesterday that this is the first continuous 10 months of exchange rate stability in the past 5 years. And I think in 2023, it was only 2 months. So our view is that the biggest threat to exchange rate stability right now is probably not at the central bank. It's the obligations that we have on the fiscal side. And I think if you look at what fueled our instability previously, and maybe some of the challenges, there was heavy money printing, which is absent at the moment. But we are looking at a risk, which is the mounting obligations on the fiscal side. And we think that that's where our worry should be. That can we sit down around the table and see how that can be addressed without creating inflationary pressures in the economy, but without also suffocating production. And in our view, we believe that this is where our advocacy and our engagement with government should be. We do recognize the challenge, but it probably requires that we discuss how to retire that mounting debt, but also how to stop contracting new debt. And I think sacrifices have been made on the monetary front. We are talking about the tight liquidity and the challenges it has come with. Maybe similar have to be made on the fiscal side, that maybe we can freeze some spending in order to give ourselves a bit of a runway to address the current debt stock that we have, particularly to the private sector, because it's a potential source of currency instability. So, well, I'm happy I'm not an economist, so I'm more optimistic.
I was going to say, it's such a multi-layered conversation that we can have, but I think we'll have to call this, final question, and then I have to close the session. Thank you. Do you want to move this way so the panel can see you?
Sure. Thank you so much. It's not a question, but maybe an affirmation of what Sekai said earlier on about informal traders and the regulation. To say that I think as it affects mainly women and youths, I think I kind of go with her suggestion, with her recommendation to say support versus scaring them, versus threatening regulation is there is a tendency to live from hand to mouth. So I kind of like what you painted. I think just from the viewpoint of working with women in the grassroots who are struggling, I think that would be a good approach for the government to be more supportive, not threatening with regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is not us against them. It's us all together trying to build a better future. Thank you. Please, a big round of applause for our panelists. Patrick, I think we have some goodies for our
We're going to
guests.
ask everybody to stay on stage, and we'll have our hostess come through and offer our tokens of appreciation. And we'll start with Sakai in consideration of her fair nature and her encouragement, which was gratefully accepted by all men when you remarked, Sakai, that we must go ye forth and multiply. We'll be sure to share those messages with all concerned.
I tell you, what an incredible conversation we just had, ladies and gentlemen, with our panelists and, of course, with the UN resident coordinator. Hang on, are you okay there? Whoa, even I almost fell. That gives you an idea.
That's the support you were talking about, by the way.
Yeah. I didn't see any men running to help, but anyway, I suppose. But it's an incredible conversation. Business, the link between business, inclusion, and how we can get people involved, formalized. And of course, this all leads to our final topic, which is confidence, which is what we're going to finally talk about today. So everything today, Patrick, feeds into each other. Everything today is interlinked, whether you're business, you're social, whether you're in the life insurance space, everything is linked. Thank you. Please, a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you
very much.
You all right? Okay, great.
But before we move forward, I'm going to go back just a little bit because I reflected on Chris's comments when he talked about the, shall we say, unusual situation at the university where people who are trained in a specific discipline are not, at the end of their qualification, able to offer any outcomes. And I was reminded of a story from Canada, actually, where a business owner who owns a timber plantation, the story goes, and he happens to visit his timber plantation. He gets there and notices that his workers are cutting down the wrong trees. And in the process, he calls out to his managers to try and correct this anomaly. But in the haste to try and achieve targets and everything else concerned with achieving efficiency, the managers ignore him and subdue what the leader is trying to communicate to his business. And in the end, they just carry on. And for me, it suggests, in line with what, I suppose, putting into context what you were saying, Chris, it's the story of efficiency versus effectiveness. And what we are doing here is really an exercise in achieving both. We need not just efficiency. What we are doing here is also focusing on what will make us effective at the end of the day. And it's a curious thing about our economy and how we're operating. So, yeah, just thought I'd leave that.
No,
Thanks.
very much so. Thank you for that, Patrick. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we get into our final panel discussion of the day, the Better Future Summit. We did have the keynote already by the permanent PS Muguti, which gave us a good foundation and grounding into what we want to talk about. So without further ado, I'd like to invite my three panelists to come on stage. First panelist, Mr. Douglas Hoto, Group CEO, First Mutual Holdings Limited. He's going to talk about the industry's perspective. Thank you. Thank you, Douglas. Rosemary Mpofu, CEO, Consumer Council of Zimbabwe. She's going to talk to us about what the consumers want, the consumer's voice. Welcome. And our last but not least, third panelist is Cuthbert Munjoma. He, of course, is from IPEC. He is the Director, Pensions and Life Insurance Supervision. Welcome, Cuthbert. Right. Douglas, as usual, we will give you the chance to talk on the industry's responsibility and the industry's perspective. Chris collapsed.
Look, so many things have been said, so you kind of don't know what to talk about. But the question that I've been asked to address is to say how can financial sector that's insurance come up to and be able to build trust. I only got it.
Hold your mic up.
So I will start by addressing that.
Guys, let's see some.
The first thing we need to do is to start with why. You're going to have to start with why. Okay, start with why. Because when you have a problem, before you can solve it, you're going to have to start with why. So, having listened to the presenters, starting with the keynote speaker, there was no address of the question of why. Why are we where we are today? And I think we can have as many conferences as we want, as many claps as we want, applaud each other, without addressing as to why we are where we are now. We'll be going in circles. So I want to start with that. In our industry in particular, first of all, I want to clarify that it's not that there's lack of insurance in Zimbabwe. There's lack of trust in long-term insurance. It's quite important for people to get into that position. It's a massive difference to generalize things. So people buy policies that they like because they take a short-term view. And the problem we must address is that why are people taking a short-term view? Again, start with why. The keynote speaker talked about taking responsibility, about looking ourselves in the eye and saying this is what happened. So my first observation is that as the Zimbabwean populace, government, players, policy holders, account holders, we have not accepted what went wrong in that the economy was mismanaged and it went belly up and value was lost. This is why we have spent 10 years talking about compensation, which will never come. I will say that again. And because we are talking about things that we will never do, we will not build trust driving, looking in the rearview mirror. We got to look forward. So the first thing I want to say is that for us to build trust, Mr. Facilitator, is that we must acknowledge the problem. What happened? Value was not just lost. It's not a total loss. The students of science here, I know some of you love STEM a lot, they were talking about it here, but the students of science here will know that economy, like matter or energy, cannot be destroyed, but it changes hands. So the dilemma we have is that the small people that build big amounts of money could not borrow their own money. Their money was borrowed by the few who could afford to pay back. The economy went wrong. The few that had borrowed benefited from paying off their assets with 1 month's salary. And they are holders of free assets that have no debt. But the poor, as usual, went on with their tragedy and they lost value. So we need to acknowledge that. So a number of us in this room can cry crocodile tears about having lost their pensions, but they own 3-4 houses for which they paid in 1 month's salary. So they are being dishonest, if you put it simply. So we need to actually face that. So once we've done that, we must go and say to our stakeholders, because insurance is a game of numbers, banking is a game of numbers. Those small people who are at the bottom of the pyramid, who lost their money, those who could borrow it, and end up with nothing, are the ones that we must go and talk to about trust. But there must be an acknowledgement of what went wrong. And to say this is what went wrong, this is where we are now. We are not going to be able to restore your lost value. I'm happy that the regulator is beginning to have the same mind with us, that there shall be no restitution. Yeah, it's happening because it's just the truth. The truth doesn't change. There shall be no restitution. There can be some effort to do something about it, but we must actually be very clear. I did, unfortunately, Guti has left. I actually did this openly with the Minister of Finance. I can tell you freely. And I put it in writing. I still have the letters that I wrote him to say, Honorable, I don't believe that we have enough money in this economy to take from those who benefited and they give to those who lost, because we can't do it. We could property rights. We should have said, let's go back and open the mortgages and everybody must get back what their balance was and start paying again so that these guys can get back their money. The beneficiaries would have fiercely resisted it, and they're the ones who are knowledgeable, they're the ones who have got lawyers, and they're the ones who are in power. So it became a tragedy of the commons, as usual. So, yes, we want to build confidence. Our job is, first of all, we should stop the blame game. Half of the time I was here, people said the insurance companies lost people's money, the banks lost people's money, and nobody protested. I was trying to be a good guest, Mr. Matseget. But guests should not do wrong things and disrupt the activities of their host. But every other speaker was saying, we lost our money. So if we are still blaming the insurance companies, how can they build trust? They are being pointed at that they lost the money. They did demutualization. I don't know whether those who were talking about know what it means, but they talked about it. So issues are very simple. We must have reality in our hands. The economy went bad. Those who could borrow money borrowed it and bought assets. The poor who could not borrow money lost their savings through hyperinflation. The biggest blame, even by the Justice Smith Commission, which I don't quite believe, by the way, was pointed at the government.